Chapter 1096. So, you're going to help him? Marl Tokat frowned. A remnant of the church? After taking Joe away, the captain of the guards immediately summoned the special envoy of the city of Glow and told him the whole story. He was not worried that the three families would covet the treasure. After all, no one knew its real use. If it was a powerful and rare treasure, it would not have been able to escape from the Kingdom of Dawn in the first place. It's not up to me to decide whether to help or not, Sean said indifferently. The order I received was to find the whereabouts of the treasure as much as possible. Now that I've finally found a seemingly credible clue, I naturally have to further confirm it. As for what to do next, His Majesty will decide. He paused and looked at Marl. So, do you have a good plan, Mr. Envoy? The First Army was invincible, but it needed an enemy. Soldiers were not good at searching for spies in the dark, so it was better to leave it to the three families. To be honest, I wish I had never heard of this. Marl shrugged. If it weren't for the church, Quinn wouldn't have been driven out of the Kingdom of Dawn. Maybe she would have been my brother's wife. Ahem, but since you've asked, I can only help you to the end. Although a lot of people have come to the town recently, it's not difficult to find a specific group. A specific group? That's right. Since we can't cross the Cage Mountain, the nearest way from the Kingdom of Wolfheart to here is by sea. Coral Bay, a port city located northeast of Thorntown, Marl said while counting his fingers. Marl counted with his fingers and said, there are about 10 to 15 people coming from the east. Some of them might even speak the Kingdom of Wolfheart's accent or dress style. Based on these criteria, we can narrow the target down to 2 or 3 groups, no more than 5 groups. Because the big city in the east only has Coral Bay? Sean said thoughtfully. For example, people coming to Neverwinter from the east might come from all over Grey Castle, but those coming from the west were basically demons. When we find these people, we'll detain them and interrogate them again. That's right. Marl nodded. And the spy you're looking for is probably among them. The problem is, who will do it? Is there anyone who knows the town better than the local rats? Problems that can be solved with money are usually not problems. In order to show the sincerity of the three families, the Tokat family will bear the cost. In a house on the outskirts of Thorntown, the butler of the Archduke Island Earl, Hagrid, was chasing away the mosquitoes around him impatiently. There wasn't even a tent for ventilation in this damned broken place. He thought angrily. Flying insects were everywhere even before summer arrived. Wouldn't it be impossible to treat people in another 2 months? However, they still had no clue why the magic ceremony cube would glow. He wasn't even sure if the king of Grey Castle was after the treasures in the Cursed Temple. What did he do during this period of time? According to the information collected by his subordinates, the exploration team of Grey Castle had arrived in Thorntown 2 months ago. After that, they built roads in the mountain and recruited condemned prisoners. It seemed that they were afraid that the whole world would not know what they were doing. They had also turned the temple on the hillside upside down. Every day, bricks and stones would be transported down from the mountain and placed in an open space guarded by guards. It would make sense if they did all this to find the buried treasures. However, the fact was that Grey Castle seemed to be more interested in the stones than the treasures. He had observed the open space from afar. After the bricks and stones were dried, they would be loaded onto carriages and sent to the Coral Bay in the east. Hagrid could not understand why the king of Grey Castle wanted these black stones. He had tried to steal some of the stones from the temple from the port and had ordered his men to bring them back to Earl Lorenzo. However, as he had expected, the magic ceremony cube did not regain its legendary power. The key to the ancient treasure's reaction must be something else. Sir, we have brought the person you are looking for. Suddenly, a subordinate lifted the curtain and reported to Hagrid. Let him in. Hagrid quickly tightened his bow tie and sat up straight. Yes. Then, a villager was pushed into the room. He knelt on the ground and looked up carefully. Sir, my name is Naf. Do you want to go up the mountain? As long as you don't cross the peak, I can take you anywhere. I heard that when the people of Grey Castle first came to the Cage Mountain, you were their guide. Hagrid interrupted. Sir. Asterisk slap. Hagrid threw a small pouch in front of him. There are 20 golden dragon stones in this pouch. If you can tell me something that interests me, it's yours. Of course, sir. I will tell you everything. Naff replied excitedly. Tell me the whole story first. Don't miss any details, Hagrid said, glancing contemptuously at the man at his feet and leaning back in his chair. When Naff told the story of a group of people climbing the Cage Mountain, he suddenly opened his eyes. Wait, what did you just say? The witch called Ozima. No, the second sentence. She held up a coin and said, this way. A coin? Hagrid asked. What kind of coin? It looked ordinary. It didn't look like a silver wolf or a bronze eagle. Naff thought for a moment. Yes, it didn't even have a pattern on it. It seemed to be just a polished sheet. Did the witch hold it up all the time? Hagrid felt that he had vaguely grasped the key point. Most of the time, the guide said. Now that you mention it, I also remember that the witches were leading the way, and every time they turned, the witches would put the coin in front of their eyes, as if they were staring at something. Damn it, it really has something to do with these mutants? Hagrid clenched his fists. Where is the witch called Ozima now? I don't know. Naff shook his head. She left Thorntown a few days later. Maybe she went back to Grey Castle? If it was only a few days, then the witch must have left Cage Mountain before he set off. However, the reaction of the magic ceremony cube did not stop, which meant the coin was left here? Hagrid thought quickly. It was probably not a coin at all, but the key that the king of Grey Castle had found in other ruins. Since it was so important, the keeper must be the leader of the exploration team. He had already inquired about this information. At present, the two highest-ranking people in the Grey Castle team were the chief commander, Sean, and the special envoy of the three noble families, Marl. Compared with the second son of a noble family, the King's Guard was more likely to be tempted. Most castles in the world were often conquered from the inside. How many golden dragons would they have to prepare to break through his defense? 500 or 1,000? But Hagrid knew that no matter how much it was, the Earl would be willing to pay for the secret of the magic cube. As long as he could get in touch with the Earl, he would not be far from the answer. Hagrid could not help but feel excited. If he could get his hands on that key, he would definitely be highly appreciated by Count Lorenzo. Maybe he could even be promoted to a liege. After all, there was no rule that only lords could use the magic cube. While he was imagining a wonderful future, he suddenly heard hurried footsteps outside the door. Wait, who are you? Hagrid heard a series of banging sounds. Before he could react, the door was violently kicked open. A group of uninvited guests in patrol uniforms rushed into the room and pressed him to the ground. Hagrid struggled to adjust his bow tie. I'm a legal merchant. You can't do this to me. If you want money, I'll try my best to cooperate. Chapter 1097. Twin Dragon Island hasn't been this lively for a long time. Standing at the top of the bridge tower of the Snow Wind, Thunder sighed with emotion as he looked down at the bustling pier. Thousands of people were gathered here, moving boxes after boxes of supplies onto the ships. From a bird's-eye view, they looked like ants lined up in a column. Shouts, horns, and the rustling of the waves on the beach were mixed together, forming the main melody before setting sail. On the other side of the pier, there were all kinds of sailing ships with their freeboard against each other. The tall masts rose and fell one after another, resembling an endless chain of mountain peaks. The flags fluttering on the peaks indicated which fleets belonged to Crescent Moon Bay, Sunset Island, Shallow Water City. These important chambers of commerce in the fjords were now gathered here, waiting for the moment to set sail. The last time he saw such a grand occasion was when he was 22 years old, when he gathered his team and set sail for the Shadow Waters. Not only Twin Dragon Island, Marjorie said with a smile. I should say that the whole fjords has been stirred up by the news you brought back. A seemingly worthless route has now become the focus of attention. It's safe, stable, and has the opportunity to become a real explorer. The new generation is born in a good era. Thunder also raised the corner of his mouth. He knew that Marjorie was talking about the festive harbor route. As long as you find a novel relic in the Endless Cape, you can exchange it for a reward from the King of Grey Castle. When the news was brought back to the fjords, it immediately caused a great commotion. The title of adventurer was very attractive to the fjords people. It not only represented fame, but also represented wealth. However, it was not easy to find a new route, island, or major secret. It required a lot of investment, and there was a possibility of losing everything or even losing one's life. However, the recruitment notice from the King of Grey Castle changed everything. The route from the fjords to the Endless Cape was a very mature one, and the new port city of Festive meant a business opportunity. Even if they could not find anything there, at least they could sell some goods, and they would not suffer a loss. If he really found something good, it would naturally be killing two birds with one stone. Furthermore, the information clearly stated that these ancient relics might be related to a huge secret about the three gods. As long as one could contribute to unraveling the secret, one would have the chance to receive the title of Lifetime Honorary Explorer conferred by Grey Castle. Although Grey Castle, as a land kingdom, was different from the Fjord Islands, it was an indisputable standard no matter where it was. In other words, the Fjord Islands valued it more. After all, it was related to the three gods that they believed in. Because the news brought back by Thunder was so attractive, there were also a small number of people who raised doubts, but these doubts did not affect the enthusiasm of the merchants to go south. The reputation of the King of Grey Castle had spread as early as when chaos drinks and perfumes swept the entire fjord's market. As more and more goods came from the other side of the channel and steam paddle steamers became more and more common, the name Roland Wimbledon was often mentioned, and the idea that Neverwinter was incomparably rich was deeply rooted in people's hearts. The establishment of the Allied Chamber of Commerce further strengthened people's confidence. Since the big employer was the king of a country, and a very powerful one at that, what was wrong with asking for a higher price? After the news spread, almost all the idle people in the fjords began to take action, so that the islands were divided into two groups. The experienced and courageous group tried every means to board Thunder's fleet, while the stable group, which hoped to be lucky, set sail to the Endless Cape and strive for a good position in the festive harbor. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, Thunder would not have imagined that a country across the sea could have such a great impact on the fjords. After all, such a change had only occurred in the past 1 or 2 years. All thanks to you. He looked at the distant sea line that looked like silver wires. Without you to manage the Chamber of Commerce for me, I wouldn't have been able to devote myself to one adventure after another. To be honest, except for exploring, I don't have any strong points. I'm not even a qualified father. I've left all the chores to you over the years. I really owe you too much. You should know that I'm doing all of this out of my own free will. Margaret pressed her hand on the back of his. Wouldn't it be too much of a letdown to someone who doesn't ask for anything in return be a little too much? Besides, we're going on a long voyage, so it's better not to say such things. Marjorie. Thunder shifted his gaze and looked into her eyes. Of course, it's not right to say that I'm not asking for any reward at all. I actually have something that I want. Margaret blinked her eyes. So, just take it that I have something else in mind. Don't feel like you owe me anything. Thunder naturally knew what she wanted. Back in Neverwinter, when he saw Lightning getting along well with her, he did not think there was anything wrong with it. Now that he thought about it, he had long been accustomed to her existence. The strange thing was that he never hesitated in the slightest when he was on an adventure, whether it was a hurricane or a big wave. But in this regard, he found it particularly difficult to ask. Just as Thunder hesitated whether to turn over his hand and hold her palm, the first mate's voice interrupted their time alone. "Boss." The latter stood on the deck of the bridge and shouted, "The caravan is basically ready. We're just waiting for your order." Thunder coughed twice and said, "Got it. I'll be right there." But he took a deep breath and looked at Marjorie. "It's time to set off. Go ahead." Marjorie nodded with a smile. "Do what you're best at," just like His Majesty said. "Well," Thunder said, "to the new world." He walked down the tower, passed through the bridge, and walked along the deck to the bow of the ship, facing the people on the dock. There was a burst of enthusiastic cheers from below. Thunder waved his hand and said, "I think everyone already knows the route we're going to take this time. So far, the farthest the fjords have been to is the Shadow Waters. But for the swirling sea, it's just like stepping out of home. This time, we'll cross the Shadow Waters, cross the incredible Sealine, and head to a place further east, the empty land that no one has ever set foot on. I once saw an extremely vast land in the Shadow Ruins, which is not inferior to the territory of the Four Kingdoms. Where is it? Will it be east of the Sealine? These are all exciting questions, and this time, we're going to find the answer. If it really exists, then the fjords people will completely say goodbye to the narrow and scarce land and no longer have to worry about living space. At the same time, it may bring us more wealth than all the routes so far combined. This is also the reason why I welcome anyone with ability to join us. With such a great return, even if there are more people to share it, it will be enough." He paused for a moment, waiting for the cheers of the crowd to subside, and then continued, "But apart from gold royals and fame, what I want is something else. That is, the fjords will be remembered in history. There are few records of us in the history books of the Four Kingdoms. The fjords have neither a century-old family nor a supreme king. It is far away from the mainland, like an isolated island, and almost no influence except for the caravan. But this situation will not last forever. When we open up a new fertile land for all mankind and bring a broad vision that subverts common sense, history will forever record us, and every explorer who embarks on a fearless journey. I hope you can understand that the significance of this expedition is not only for the present, but also for the future. Raise the sails, guys." Thunder raised his arms high. "Set sail to the new world." Below, countless hands also rose up, and everyone's voices resounded through the sky. Chapter 1098. Grey Castle, City of Neverwinter. Roland was sitting at his desk, listening to a call from the front line of the fertile plains. Of course, it was not entirely accurate to say that it was the front line. Considering the speed of signal attenuation, it was only wide enough for a call between Neverwinter and Longsong. Before the invention of the repeater amplifier, this was also the maximum distance of a handheld phone. However, this did not mean that it was impossible to break through this limit. The simplest way was to let Leaf act as a relay. In the state of the heart of forest, her consciousness could cover the entire misty forest, which meant that she could transmit messages faster than lightning, who could fly at the speed of sound. The front line only needed to call Leaf, and then Leaf would relay the message to Roland. In a sense, this could be regarded as a real-time communication. "The current situation is going well," Leaf said in a low voice, imitating Iron Axe's tone. "As you expected, the demons have launched several destructive attacks on the railway, but the impact on logistics and transportation is not significant. Without the help of the spider demons, they would have to land near the tracks and move the tracks with brute force. They would have to evacuate before the Black River got close to the tracks. The Ministry of Engineering would be able to repair the damaged tracks without having to replace the tracks. It seems that the armored train has played its role." "Indeed, Your Majesty. It can be used as a small stronghold, whether it's for mobile rescue or railway maintenance. The only regret is that the number of trains is still too small. If possible, I'd like to arrange a Black River between each station." "It's easy for you to think about it," Roland couldn't help but grin. In addition to the armored train, the freight train also needs to be produced, and this part of the work is still inseparable from the witches. Now that we have two, it's already very good. Continue to push forward the front line and try to complete the general attack before midsummer." "Yes, Your Majesty," Leaf replied in a low, muffled voice. "Actually, you don't have to imitate my nasal voice." Roland coughed. "By the way, are there any signs of the demons launching another large-scale attack?" A week ago, he had been woken up by Nightingale in the middle of the night and learned that the First Army had been attacked. He had been really nervous for a while, but fortunately, Anna had told him that the loss was not big and Edith had calmed the people down. Only then did Roland feel relieved. In fact, the First Army's weakness had always been fighting in a lightless or dimly lit environment. Not being able to see the target would greatly reduce the killing efficiency of the hot weapons. Moreover, there was no way to mass-produce the tracer bullets, so they had to rely on the witch's abilities to a large extent. Who would have thought that the demons would choose to launch their first attack at night? Not only did they understand Sylvie's magic eye thoroughly, but they also realized the nature of guns and cannons. They dispersed their formation and even crawled forward. Fortunately, the demons did not have enough weapons to fight against them, and the First Army had executed all the requirements of the emergency combat training. Otherwise, the result would be hard to predict. If it's an attack like the last night attack, we didn't find any signs of it, Leaf said. Miss Sylvie spends 1 or 2 hours every day to check the places that the demons must pass through. She also takes the magic ark or the seagull out to investigate from time to time. At least it's safe so far. What did the general staff say? They think there are 2 possibilities. One is that the demons have sensed our change and can't use the same trick again. The other is that the demons have limited forces and can't plan 2 large-scale attacks in a short period of time. Really? Roland said thoughtfully. What worried him the most in the last attack was not only the demon's amazing learning ability, but also the senior demon who was the attacker. It was not the first time that something like this had happened. Now that he thought about it, since the first senior demon appeared behind the snow mountain, Neverwinter had fought with this kind of special evolved demons 4 times. Hundreds of years ago, the senior demons were the generals of the army. The Union could only kill them after sending out the Blessed Army to defeat them head-on. But now, the status of the senior demons had obviously declined, and the frequency of their appearance had increased, which was not good news. The God's Punishment Army, which was an extraordinary army with brute force, could still deal with them. However, if a group of senior demons with various abilities broke into the camp, they would have to pray for God's blessing. Since there was no special way to deal with the demons, Roland could only think of a universal solution, such as constantly pursuing more powerful firepower and completely wiping out the demons before they could take action. The demons will never let their foothold on the fertile plains be threatened by human beings. Continue to be vigilant and don't give them any chance to take advantage of us. Understood. Leaf raised her voice and then said in a normal tone, Your Majesty, Iron Axe has hung up. Phew. Roland gently exhaled. Who's the next person to report? It's the Minister of Construction, Car Van Bate. The Ministry of Construction? He was a little surprised. With sufficient materials and manpower, there shouldn't be any difficulties in the project. Bring it in. Your Majesty. Leaf imitated Car's voice again. Although it was not as difficult to distinguish as Echo's voice, she sounded quite good with the swaying branches and rubbing leaves. The construction team has encountered some trouble recently. I think we may need help from other departments in the administrative office. Is this girl addicted to it? What the Minister of Construction wanted to report was very simple. After the night attack, many workers were frightened and their morale was obviously low. Moreover, the construction of the railway was a long project, and many foremen found that their workers were slacking. Carr hoped to change shifts or call relatives to improve morale. After all, not everyone was willing to take risks in pursuit of high pay. Therefore, Roland focused on the second method. Relatives? I remember that more than 70% of the workers who applied to build the railway are immigrants, and many of them don't have a complete family. If the polarization is too obvious, I'm afraid it will cause a worse impact. I've also considered this, Your Majesty. Leaf replied on behalf of Roland. Before the railway construction team set out, they issued a transfer contract. I think maybe we can use the person designated in the contract to replace the relatives. Since they're willing to entrust everything to the other party after their sacrifice, they must be very important to them. In a sense, they can be regarded as relatives. Chapter 1099. After ending the conversation with the frontline, Nightingale placed a silver-white sealing ring on Roland's desk. This was a special buckle for flying messengers. It was made of 2 pieces of aluminum and could hold a palm-sized curled paper inside. It was much more advanced than the original method of tying the paper directly to the claws. Coupled with Soroya's special ultra-thin paper, the amount of information transmitted in secret letters had increased significantly. As the probability of accidents happening to the flying messengers was not negligible after the distance exceeded 500 kilometers, all administrative offices had set up relay nodes. In order to efficiently sort secret letters, the buckle was also printed with identification numbers, which were equivalent to the train tickets of the modern world. With just a glance, one would know where the secret letter came from and where it was to be delivered. The letter C on the buckle represented that it came from the Kingdom of Dawn. When Roland set this system for the sake of confidentiality, he directly used the pinyin abbreviation instead of the standard characters commonly used by the Four Kingdoms. From Thorntown in the Kingdom of Dawn? He raised his eyebrows. When did you get it? Just 10 minutes ago, Honey came, Nightingale replied. But I saw you were on the phone, so I didn't interrupt you. Did they find something new in the Cage Mountain ruins? Roland pried open the buckle and unfolded the letter. The content of the letter was a little long, and it took him half a minute to understand the situation that the guards had encountered recently. I didn't expect that there would be a day when the church would ask for help from Grey Castle. Putting down the letter, Roland could not help but sigh. Although he knew that once they gave up on Hermes, they would never have a chance to make a comeback, but it was not a problem for them to go to a remote place and become a powerful force. In the end, the one who gave the fugitives a fatal blow was the former bishop of the church. He had to admit that it was really a dramatic ending. What happened to the group of stray dogs who abandoned the orphans in the monastery in the Holy City? Nightingale asked curiously. If what the letter says is true, the church has almost ceased to exist. Roland handed the letter to him. Their last hope has betrayed them. Nightingale looked at him after reading the letter. What do you plan to do then? Since the butler of the Count of Archduke Island has confessed everything, and we also know the whereabouts of the relics, it's only a matter of time before we send someone to the kingdom of Wolfheart. Roland tapped the table and said, if the magic ceremony cube can react to the highly concentrated uranium, then the murals in the murals may not be purely artistic. No matter what it was used for, it was best for Neverwinter to control it. As for the captured church agent, Farina. He paused. Bring her back with Joe for trial. That does sound like your answer. Nightingale smiled. I thought you wouldn't like the answer. Roland deliberated over his words. After all, the church had once persecuted you cruelly. I did hate the church, and I even hated humans. Nightingale said frankly, but since I found out that Alice, who is also a witch, was behind all this and that everything she did was for the sake of her own survival, I changed my mind. It's hard to hate her anymore. I only feel that she's pitiful and pathetic. Besides, the church that was supported by the Starfall City has disappeared. Even if I want to take revenge, I can't find a target. Did you hate humans? Roland asked in surprise. It would be strange if I didn't hate them. Nightingale glared at him. I can't control my magic awakening, and I didn't use it to do evil. Why should I be driven away like a rat on the street? Since you see me as an alien, why should I get along with you? That's probably what I thought at that time. And I dare say that most witches have similar feelings. Is that why you showed up in my bedroom with a dagger in the first place? At that time, I had already restrained myself enough. Nightingale burst into laughter. The idea of hating humans was just a vague idea, but hating the nobles was a real thing. If Anna hadn't fallen into your hands, I wouldn't have had the patience to sit down and talk with you. Have you forgotten my former title? Well, he didn't. He was the Shadow Killer, the deadly ghost that once made the entire noble circle in the old King's City shudder. So your desire at that time was? It was a pretense. Nightingale covered her mouth and said, if I could make you reveal your true nature, Anna would have a deeper understanding of what nobles are. Unfortunately. Unfortunately what? Are you regretting that you couldn't persuade Anna to leave Border Town, or are you regretting that your desire didn't work? Roland said grumpily, it seems that I was really lucky at that time. When you have hatred in your heart, it's easy to go to extremes. Nightingale patted him on the shoulder. It didn't take me long to realize that there were aliens like you among the nobles, just like me. Maybe it's not a bad idea to try to trust you. Should I say thank you for your approval? You're welcome, she said confidently. As for later, there were also pure witches among the witches, even existences like Zero. Naturally, those immature ideas disappeared without a trace. Really? It's not easy for you. Roland sighed. Why do I feel that you're a little depressed? Nightingale leaned over and the ends of her hair fell on his cheek. I pretended to be depressed in the beginning, but it doesn't mean that I'll pretend to be depressed in the future. For example, now. As soon as her voice died away, she disappeared into the mist. When she reappeared, she was leaning on the recliner with dried fish in her mouth and winking at him proudly. Roland gritted his teeth and stood up. When he was about to teach her a lesson and let her know who the real king of Grey Castle was, his phone suddenly rang. It was the hotline of the director of the administrative office. He gave Nightingale a wait-and-see look and picked up the phone. Your Majesty, Barov's voice soon came from the other end of the line. A special visitor has come to the Old King City. He said that he wants to see you no matter what. It was not common for the Hand of the King to personally introduce a guest to him. Oh, who's he? The dramatist, His Excellency Cajun Fells. Barov sounded a little excited. Why him again? Roland frowned. Didn't I make it very clear in the letter that I refused him? I have a lot of things to do. If he doesn't have anything urgent. Yes, Your Majesty. Barov hurriedly told him the purpose of Cajun's visit. Are you sure? Roland was a little surprised. Yes, he said it himself. The steward said solemnly. Chapter 1100. This was the first time that Roland had seen this famous actor and playwright when he walked into the hall. Half of his hair had already turned white, and most of his cheeks were surrounded by a fluffy beard. He was wearing a pressed black suit, and his collar was meticulously tied. He looked like a character who had walked out of a portrait, and he was filled with a strong sense of the times. If his mug shot was hung on the classroom wall with a famous quote, it wouldn't look out of place at all. Although he was old, his eyes were still bright and full of vigor. After bowing, his eyes were fixed on Roland without looking away. Obviously, this was not the first time for this playwright to be received by the royal family. Your Majesty, this is His Excellency Cajun Fells, Barov said, rubbing his hands together. He's the most accomplished playwright in Grey Castle. His reputation has a certain influence in the Four Kingdoms. When I was still in the Old King City, I was a frequent visitor to the Central Grand Theatre to enjoy the performances of Cajun's troupe. Look at how happy you are. Roland twitched his mouth. You're already the Hand of the King. Can't you be more mature? Salute to you, Your Majesty Wimbledon, Cajun said with a hand on his chest. Cajun put his hand on his chest and said, I think now I know why you didn't like the new play. Roland sat down on the main seat. Tell me about it. You're too young, Cajun replied slowly. Younger than I thought. Do you mean that people without a certain level of experience can't appreciate your plays? If Roland had been the lord of Border Town for the first time, he would have been displeased by Cajun's answer. However, having been in this position for a long time, Roland no longer cared about verbal confrontations. Nevertheless, his relaxed tone showed his attitude. Barov, who was standing beside Roland, secretly winked at Cajun. No, Your Majesty, when I say young, I don't mean your age, but your mental state, Cajun Fells said, shaking his head. It doesn't start from 0, nor does it end at 100. I've seen many nobles in the prime of their lives, but their spirits are old. Similarly, those who have entered their twilight years do not necessarily grow old. At this point, he laughed self-deprecatingly. I thought I was young enough, but after seeing you, I realized that it really has no limits. Should I take that as a compliment? Roland raised his eyebrows. Mental youth cannot be measured by good or bad, Your Majesty. To Lin Sanjiu's surprise, Cajun did not continue the conversation as he had expected. Spiritual youthfulness is accompanied by aggressiveness, fearlessness, curiosity, and so on. It can push a person forward, but it can also make him lose himself. Sometimes, it can even lead to destruction, so Ahem, Lord Cajun. Bhairav interrupted in a low voice. I'm sorry, I just said it casually. The drama master came back to his senses. I'm old and I've seen a lot of people. It's normal for me to have some strange ideas. Please forgive me. It doesn't matter. Roland waved his hand. He had a better impression of Cajun. Let's get back to business. I heard from Bhairav that you're planning to take on my script or join the Starflower Troupe. Cajun answered directly, I want to know more about the magic movie. I see. You want to achieve your goal in a roundabout way after being rejected by me. Even if you're going to perform some plays that you despise. I don't despise those plays. Roland explained. I just think that a play should be carefully prepared so that the actors can continue to improve. Otherwise, it'll be a waste of energy and talent, and it'll disappoint the audience. But your audience isn't a nobleman, and I don't have that much time to wait for you to rehearse. If you join the Starflower Troupe, you'll probably be forced to perform plays that are far from perfect. If that happens, your reputation as a drama master will be ruined. Even so, are you still willing to perform? Your Majesty, So don't join the Starflower Troupe. Of course, Roland would not allow Cajun to say that he was willing. And the plays I'm planning to perform will need a certain audience base, which is limited to the Starflower Troupe. I'm afraid that there won't be any suitable plays for you in a short time. This time, it was Bhairav's turn to give Roland a wink. But Roland ignored the director's wink. It's not entirely impossible. Please go ahead. Cajun could not help leaning forward slightly. In fact, I'm planning to write a play with a theme related to love. It's about the flower of love in the darkest times, and the background is the period when the Church of Hermes set things right. Roland unhurriedly explained his plan. I've heard that you're best at love and redemption, so I'll take it as a test. If you can make this play a great success, I'll consider your request during the next shooting of the magic movie. What do you think? Ever since they had occupied both the old and new holy cities, Neverwinter's propaganda had changed. The real pope had been persecuted and killed by the fake pope who had done all kinds of evil deeds. Now, the new agent would fully support Greycastle to resist the threat of the Battle of Divine Will. After more than a year of propaganda, the new history had a certain audience base. Now it was time to go further and reveal the so-called battle of faith and the origin of the church. Once this was done, the new church would not only separate itself from the usurper but also from the church that had persecuted witches in history. It would become a part of Neverwinter's regime. You mean this play is based on the truth? Cajun murmured. Can I meet the two people in the story? They're still in the kingdom of Wolfheart. Their rescue team hasn't set off yet. Roland shrugged. And I think you understand what I mean. Of course, the dramatist said with a nod. The plays I wrote were also based on the legends of the royal family. I tried my best to avoid using any real surnames or family histories. But what? Cajun hesitated for a moment but soon made up his mind. Your Majesty, this is an unprecedented attempt for me. If it's possible, I'd like to join your rescue team and watch the whole operation. It'll be a great help to the rehearsal of the play. Even if you go to the kingdom of Wolfheart? Roland was slightly moved. I don't think I can imagine all the details, and I don't want to miss this opportunity, Cajun said frankly. Please don't worry. I'm in good health, and I'll be accompanied by my apprentices. I won't cause any trouble for your team. Chapter 11:01. After the dramatist left, Bhairav immediately came up to Roland and said anxiously and pitifully, Your Majesty, why didn't you agree to his request? It's synonymous with Greycastle's plays. Other troupes can't even dream of joining. I'm not saying that the Starflower Troupe isn't good, but Ms. May is not as famous. If Cajun Fells joins, the Starflower Troupe will be the best troupe in the kingdom. Even if he knows nothing about the magic movie, he'll be able to attract a large number of actors with his name alone. The troupe won't have to worry about manpower anymore. Roland rolled his eyes at him and said, Haven't you heard that the easier it is to get something, the less it will be cherished? The old butler could not help but be taken aback. Please forgive me for my ignorance. Which person or book said this? I said that, Roland said, pretending to be serious. It's human nature. Do you understand? He has been attracted by the magic movie and will stay in Neverwinter no matter what. In this case, a difficult test will naturally leave a deeper impression on him than a direct answer. He might even be grateful to me for giving him this opportunity. Otherwise, it will make him feel that everything is natural. This is the difference between the two. He paused for a moment and said, besides, May is only a disciple in front of Cajun. How can the Starflower Troupe be called Starflower Troupe if it has a dramatist? It's not a big problem for him to participate in the shooting of the magic movie. If he's not in the troupe, he can give the younger members some pressure. You're right, Barev said hesitantly. But about going to the kingdom of Wolfheart? There's nothing to worry about, Roland interrupted him directly. It's his choice. I also want to see what kind of play Cajun can put on. By the way, you don't have time to worry about others. Have you finished the statistical work I asked you to do? If not, hurry up and do it. Yes, Your Majesty. I'll take my leave now. Barev hurriedly bowed and left the parlor. You're becoming more and more like a king, Your Majesty Wimbledon. Nightingale appeared behind him and said with squinted eyes. Ah, you flatter me. Roland suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart. He hadn't heard her use honorifics in a long time. With our relationship, you don't have to use such a formal form of address. But why do I feel that it's not good to be too close? Nightingale crossed her arms and said, the easier it is to get something, the less one will cherish it. So this is your way of thinking. It seems that I have to be careful not to be too nice to you. Also, I have to remind Anna not to let a certain someone be too complacent. Roland felt cold sweat forming on his forehead. Well, anyway, humans are humans and the phantom is the phantom. They're not the same thing. And I wasn't the one who said it first, but you agree, Nightingale snorted softly. The magic power in my chest tells me that you're at least 55% credible. Now her ability to tell lies is accurate to 1 decimal place. Roland rubbed his forehead. Wait, chest? He remembered Agatha said that although a witch's magic power would appear as a cyclone under observation, it was not a physical entity and would not really gather into a ball. Instead, it flowed in every corner of the body. Did you really use your ability just now? Roland questioned. Nightingale laughed. It seems that you found out. But it was you who said it. If the other sisters heard it, would they also feel that they're being taken for granted? 5 bottles of chaos drinks, Roland said. 10 bottles, each with a different taste. Nightingale licked her lips. Too many will make others suspicious. Suspicious of what? It'll be unfair. Don't worry. As long as I want to hide something, no one will find it. 8 bottles. If it's too easy to get No, nothing. I'll think about it. In the end, Roland signed the unfair clause at the cost of 10 bottles of chaos drinks. Looking at Nightingale, who returned triumphantly with a small dried fish in her arms, Roland shook his head helplessly. In the evening, Barev came up with a list of all the visitors. Lady Scroll and I have compared the family records and transfer contracts. Based on the principle of the former taking precedence, we have determined the first batch of candidates to go to the fertile plains. There are more than 1,600 people. He reported over the phone. The relevant visit plan is also being worked out. If everything goes well, they'll be able to set off in 2 days. Very good. Roland was sincerely satisfied with the efficiency of the administrative office. He was indeed the minister he had trained. Implement it as soon as possible. Yes, Your Majesty. But Your Majesty, one of the workers is registered as a witch. A witch? Roland raised his eyebrows. The worker's name is Snaketooth from the Long Song area. He used to be a Blackstreet rat, and the witch is Miss Paper. Paper? It suddenly occurred to Roland that when Petrov sent her here, he did mention her identity, as well as the small dispute that happened upon. Is this person her former companion? Should we ignore it? Berev asked, probably because Roland did not speak for a long time. After all, Miss Paper has nothing to do with her past life. Roland interrupted his thoughts. Of course not. She said goodbye to her life as a rat, not her former companion. Don't forget that the key to eliminating the rats is to transform them. No matter who they used to be, they shouldn't be treated differently. A former Blackstreet rat, now an expeditionary worker. Roland slightly raised the corner of his mouth. They had been separated for almost 2 years and probably did not even know what had happened to each other. Even so, his companion still wrote the other party's name on the handover contract. This feeling was really not bad. I'll inform Paper, Roland said. Just carry out the rest as planned. As you wish, Your Majesty. In an open space southwest of Tower Station No. 1, the First Army was holding a simple funeral. Close to 300 pure white tombstones stood neatly in the middle of the lush grassland, appearing solemn and orderly. Although there was nothing buried under the tombstones, everyone stood solemnly as if their deceased comrades were standing in front of them. Here lie the brave warriors who sacrificed their lives to protect Tower Station No. 1. They did not retreat in the face of the ferocious and terrible enemies. Because they knew that Grey Castle was right behind them. They were His Majesty's sword and the high wall for the people of the kingdom. Their names will always be remembered by us. Their will be inherited by us. For His Majesty, for the kingdom of Grey Castle. Salute! Following Iron Axe's lead, everyone raised their right hands and gave a military salute as a farewell. Lightning quietly landed on a barracks. In the front row of the crowd, she saw a familiar figure. Chapter 1102. When the crowd dispersed and the old man boarded the train again, Lightning flew into the cab through the rear window and landed quietly in the carriage. The old man stood in front of the console, looking down at the item in his hand motionlessly like a silent statue. Looking at his back, she wanted to say something to comfort him, but she did not know what to say. It wasn't until she touched the half-open window in hesitation that the man noticed her presence. "Ah, you're the little girl from the other day." The old man blinked in surprise. "My name is Lightning." Lightning could not help but take a step back. "Sorry, I see. You're here to comfort me, aren't you?" He suddenly grinned. "Oh, really, I'm not old enough to need a little girl to comfort me. Sorry about that. But the ability of a witch is really convenient. I can go wherever I want." The old man did not look as sad as Lightning had imagined, which made her feel a little relieved. I'll knock first next time." "I'm not blaming you, child." The old man put down the folding table on the wall and wiped it with his sleeve. "Come sit here. I'll pour you a cup of tea. This is the only thing that can be used to entertain people." Thank you." Lightning slowly walked to the table and sat down. When she got closer, she found that it was a Neverwinter ID card on the console. "My name is Brushere, or you can call me by my nickname, Mr. Loud Voice. The kids on the train often call me that." The old man brought a cup of hot tea to the table. "Did you attend the funeral?" Lightning nodded and then shook her head. "I just happened to fly over and watched for a while." "That means you didn't lose any friends. That's really good news." She clenched the cup. "Your son." "His name is Robert, the third son in the family. He died fighting for the artillery position," Brushere said calmly. "The battalion commander said he was very brave." "He is indeed very brave," Lightning said in a low voice. She had heard about the whole process of the battle from Sylvie. Without firepower support and the presence of the gods' punishment witches, it would have been impossible for a person to take such a step forward while facing the demon spears without sufficient courage. In fact, Lao San used to be the most timid one. When he was mining in the mines, no matter how the foreman bullied him, he never dared to fight back. "He would only come back and complain to me," Brushere said with mixed feelings. "Do you find it strange that I don't look so sad?" The little girl was at a loss for words. "No, it doesn't matter," the old man comforted her. "Because I knew this day would come sooner or later. My third son and the other 2 sons all told me the same thing." "What did they say?" They said that they wanted to protect Neverwinter, their hometown, and everything they had worked so hard to get. The old man took a sip of tea. To be honest, I didn't understand at that time. I even asked why it was them and not others. Lightning was also wondering why. Brushere seemed to read her mind. Their answer was that others had already been sacrificed. Since the beginning of the militia's fight against the demonic beasts, many people have died. It was the same when we fought against the Duke of Ryan and the church. If everyone thought about why it was them and not others, we would still be living like livestock in the mines, the old man said. The old man said, as long as it's a battle, there will inevitably be sacrifices. Whoever's turn is who's who. If no one is willing to go, there's no need to fight this battle. In the end, we'll still be at the mercy of the enemy, that's what they told me. I don't know whether my 3 sons are right or not, but at least I'm sure that it's their own choice. He took a deep breath. My children have all grown up. It's enough for me that they can walk on the path that they believe is right. Compared to eldest brother who died of a cold, third brother's name will be remembered by the army forever. What do I have to be sad about? Lightning could not help but recall the words of the other party that night. They used to live like mice, both thin and cowardly, but since joining the army, it is as if they have changed inside and outside. This is also the reason why I am full of confidence in the First Army. A team composed of such people will not be easily defeated. So that's how it is. By the way, I still have to thank you. Thank me? Lightning was stunned. Of course, the old man smiled. Without your timely notification, the camp would have suffered greater losses. In a way, you also protected the First Army and my other son. I was wondering when I would meet you again. Maybe I would never see you again. I didn't expect you to appear right behind me. It's great to be able to thank me in person. After drinking the tea, Lightning waved goodbye to Broocher. She flew out of the carriage and saw the old man return to the control panel through the window. He grabbed the ID card and covered his face with his hands. Back in the residential area, Maggie was hovering in the air. As soon as she saw Lightning, she pounced on her. Where have you been, Koo? Why did you come back so late, Koo? Have you forgotten what's going to happen today? What is it? Today is the day that Lorgar is discharged from the hospital. Maggie folded her wings and landed on her head. Go to the medical center, Koo. Okay, I got it. Don't move around. Lightning held the pigeon and flew to the center of the camp. After the last night attack, the layout of Tower Station Number 1 had changed a lot. Looking down from the sky, except for the platform, the yard and the sentry tower, the rest of the area was flat. Functional buildings such as the barracks and the medical center had all sunk into the ground. The firepower could cover both the outer circle of the defensive line and the inner circle. Even if the demons used the same trick again, they would not be able to cause as much damage as last time. Before long, they saw the familiar figure of the wolf girl. Hey! Lorgar flicked her ears. Long time no see. It's only been a week. Lightning heaved a sigh of relief when she saw how energetic the other party was. After all, according to Maggie's description of the wolf girl's condition when she was carried into the medical center, she looked as if she was about to die. Maybe it's because I've been sleeping every day. It feels longer. Lorgar stretched herself. Nana is so stubborn. She had to wait for a week to recover. I think the wound will heal by itself in a week. Since witches were much more resistant to the sleeping fern's side effects than ordinary people, the sleeping treatment was usually effective in saving the magic power of the healer, as long as it was not life-threatening. This was also the experience accumulated by the Union during the war. You're indeed a monster. You're almost as good as Lady Ash's Koo, Maggie said while flapping her wings. After talking to Miss Andrea, I don't think it's a compliment, Lorgar muttered. Koo. No, nothing. She walked to Lightning, put her arms around the little girls and lifted her up. Hey, what are you doing? Put me down, Lightning said shyly. Someone's watching. I heard from Sylvie about everything you've done. So, it's still possible to work hard. Lorgar held Lightning in her arms. That's the leader I know. Lightning stopped struggling. She felt a warm feeling in her heart. After a moment of silence, she said in a low voice, "But I'm still a coward. The fact that you can say this to me means that you've taken that step." Lorgar put Lightning down. "You're not thinking of leaving alone now, are you?" Lightning looked at the wolf girl and then at Maggie. She nodded gently. The moment she agreed, she felt as if something was pressing on her shoulders. But she did not reject this feeling. Instead, she felt inexplicably at ease. Maggie tilted her head. "What are you talking about, Koo?" "We're talking about celebrating." Lorgar straightened up. "Since I'm safe and sound, shouldn't we have a drink?" "Celebrate Koo. Let's celebrate Koo." Maggie echoed excitedly. "Hey, wait a minute," Lightning said. "I have to patrol at night." Chapter 1103. The day after the funeral, a piece of news from Neverwinter stirred up the whole engineering team. His Majesty had prepared a visiting party for them. All the workers who had completed the 3-month working period would get a paid day off, and their long-lost families would arrive at the terminus of the misty forest from Neverwinter and spend the precious day together. Everyone was grateful for such a considerate decree. As soon as the news arrived, cheers of "Long live the King" could be heard everywhere, and they worked even harder. Snaketooth was one of them. In fact, when the foreman found him and looked at the contact list, he could not believe his eyes. At the end of his row on the list, the name "White Paper" almost caused his mind to go blank. "Hey, do you agree to this arrangement or not?" Snaketooth clearly remembered the foreman's slightly impatient urging, or rather, the foreman had recorded every detail from seeing the list to signing the name. Every time he recalled the past, he could not help but grin. "Let me make this clear. If you have any objections, you can fill in another name. The administrative office will ask again. But if you're rejected, your holiday will be cancelled." For the sake of saving time, the foreman naturally hoped that the list could be approved in one go. But Snaketooth knew that the man did not understand his feelings at that time. He wanted to hug the administrative office official who had compiled the list and give him a kiss, let alone raise an objection. "I agree, 100% agree." "Well, if you agree, you should have said so earlier. Don't just stand there like an idiot." The foreman rolled his eyes at him and went to find the next person after Snaketooth signed the name. Snaketooth stayed where he was and stared blankly at the hand holding the pen for a long time. Until now, he still had the thought, "If this is a dream, I might as well never wake up." Unlike when he saw Paper in Neverwinter by chance, he did not dare to greet her because he was afraid of being rejected. Now, Paper was a member of the Witch Union, and her clothes and complexion were not the same as the skinny girl from before. If Paper did not want to have anything to do with rats, his presence would only cause her more trouble. However, the fact that Paper's name was on the list meant that the administrative office had asked for her opinion beforehand, and she had agreed to the visit. What he was most worried about did not happen, and he even got a chance to be alone with her. For Snaketooth, nothing could be more pleasant than this. In the next few days, he was in a state of eagerness and excitement. Due to the large number of visitors and the limited capacity of the train, excluding the goods, it could only transport about 100 people at a time. Therefore, even though he was on the first list of visitors by the time the day arrived, it was already a week later. "Kid, it's your turn today? She's dressed so cleanly." "Is she a girl? Don't forget the time tonight." Snaketooth ran out of the door, blushing under the teasing of his roommates. Only when he boarded the train with the nameplate did he heave a sigh of relief. No matter what, there were only 2 hours left before he could see Paper. Someone in the carriage kept reading out the precautions for visiting, such as not leaving the security perimeter of the forest terminus without permission, meeting after 8 o'clock at the latest, and not exceeding the prescribed time. In case of an emergency, they should immediately act according to the instructions of the First Army, and so on. However, Snaketooth had heard it many times from people who had been here before, so he was very familiar with it. With a long whistle, the train finally slowly stopped at the platform of the last station in the misty forest. "Get off the train and line up. Don't push," the station staff shouted. "This isn't grocery shopping. You'll get your share." The crowd burst into laughter. Snaketooth felt his heart pounding. The more he tried to restrain himself, the stronger it would be. He had imagined countless scenes of their meeting and rehearsed them over and over again, but when it really came to this moment, he still felt his mouth go dry and he was as clumsy as a fat pigeon. However, when the pretty figure appeared in front of him, Snaketooth found that everything he had imagined disappeared without a trace. He could only smile foolishly and could not say a word. "It turns out that you live in Neverwinter. That's great." The girl trotted over with a smile and grabbed his hand. Without hesitation or dislike, the estrangement of 2 years melted with this smile. Everything was just like the past. At that moment, Snaketooth felt that coming to Neverwinter was the right choice. "So, you came here soon after you reclaimed the Longsong area?" The two of them walked side by side on the forest path. Unlike the noisy center of the camp, this place was much quieter and had a more solitary atmosphere. She, who had not seen him for a long time, seemed to have a lot of things to say to him, as if she wanted to fill in the blank space she had missed. Snaketooth answered all her questions. Compared with the former boss and follower, they were now more like a pair of partners. Yes, the rats were completely eradicated and there were many job openings posted on the square. "If we continue to do what we did before, we'll be finished sooner or later." Snaketooth nodded. "Tiger Claw and I discussed it and came to Neverwinter. It's the same job but the salary here is higher and I can be closer to you." However, these words just flashed across his mind, and he did not say them out loud. "No wonder I couldn't find you. You're not in that place anymore," Paper said with emotion. "Did you go to the Longsong area?" "I asked someone to go there," the girl said slowly. "When I learned that the entire Dark Corner Alley had been demolished, I thought you had already left the Western region. So, that's what happened. But since you came to Neverwinter, why didn't you look for me?" Paper asked. "Well, it's a long story." Snaketooth coughed. "At that time, Tiger Claw and I had nothing. In order to have a permanent residence, we were busy from morning to night, so we forgot about it." Even he himself felt this excuse was clumsy. If he had forgotten about it for 2 years, what was the difference between that and not remembering at all? However, he could never say such shameful things as being too embarrassed to greet her and deliberately avoiding her when he saw her. Fortunately, Paper did not pursue the matter further. "Me too. When I first came to Neverwinter, I was also very busy. I helped the construction team speed up the solidification of cement, assisted Lady Agatha, and helped the chemical plant make all kinds of strange things." She counted on her fingers and said, "His Majesty said that my ability can speed up the reaction process and increase the energy level of the chemical bond. I'm very curious about how he knew that. According to the book, those particles are much smaller than sesame seeds. Can you imagine it? If you look at an atom as big as an opera house, its core is less than the size of a walnut." Hearing these words that he could not understand, Snaketooth could only nod in agreement. For a moment, he did feel the change in Paper and the difference between them. But more than that, his gaze lingered on the other party's every frown and every smile. Those sparkling eyes, those slightly raised eyelashes, the thin tip of her nose, the opening and closing of her lips. Everything was so captivating. He felt an impulse in his heart ready to burst forth. By the way, Paper changed the topic after telling him about her experience. "After knowing that you were in Neverwinter, I asked Miss Scroll to check the files and found that Sunflower and the others were also here. That's great. We can get together often in the future." Snaketooth did not hear the latter part of Paper's words. At this moment, his mind was completely occupied by one thought. So he said it out loud. "I like you, Paper." After blurting it out, he realized what he had done. An indescribable sense of nervousness immediately wrapped around his body, and his entire heart was in his throat. For a moment, Snaketooth even regretted his impulse. But to his surprise, he soon got a response. Chapter 1104. Did she really say that at that time? After listening to Leaf's narration, Vendi burst into laughter. What about Snaketooth? Didn't he say anything else? He just giggled with her. Leaf shook her head. Maybe it wasn't easy to muster up the courage to say those words. He probably used up all his courage after just one time. I think so. Vendy's smile widened. It's so good to be young. Is it good for us to do this? To eavesdrop on our conversation. Leaf's green phantom descended from the branches and condensed into her true form. I'm not eavesdropping. I'm just fulfilling His Majesty's request. Vendy said righteously, he asked me to pay attention to their actions. Since I want to pay attention to them, talking is part of it, isn't it? In that case, there was indeed no problem. Besides, if I didn't ask you to, you wouldn't have eavesdropped on their conversation, right? Wendy looked at Leaf with a smile. The latter cleared her throat and raised the corner of her mouth. The two looked at each other and burst into laughter. Leaf waved her hand. A huge vine rose from the ground and slowly lifted herself and Vendy to the top of the tree. Then the dense branches spread, crisscrossed, and reunited to form a veranda made of green leaves. Looking from this angle, the world suddenly became a lot brighter. The dense forest that extended all the way to Dragon's Pine Ridge was like a sea of emerald trees, and on the other side was a vast grassland. When she was still in the Witch Cooperation Association, Leaf would occasionally build similar tree houses for her sisters to avoid the heavy rain and the muddy and wet ground. However, it usually took more than half a day to build a resting place. In order to save as much magic power as possible, the treehouse was basically like a cicada cocoon. Even so, not everyone had a place to stay. But now, not only did the veranda look like a model, but also a lounge chair and a tea table were built. There were even 2 broad leaf cups on the coffee table, and the light golden flower nectar in the cups sparkled under the sunlight. Did you brew this yourself? Vendy picked up the teacup and gently sniffed it. An elegant fragrance wafted into her nose. Yes, I used morning dew, honey, and sugarcane wine. I also added some half-open jasmine buds. Leaf nodded. Although it's not as good as chaos drinks, you can drink as much as you want. You're getting stronger and stronger, Vendy exclaimed. Although they all say that Her Highness Anna is a once-in-a-century genius, I don't think you're any worse than her. As long as you have enough time, you might be able to control all the forests in the world and spread your consciousness to every corner of the continent. At my current speed, I definitely can't do that. Leaf smiled and waved her hand. It will take nearly 10 years just to integrate this misty forest. By the time I can leave here, I'll probably be old. That's not necessarily true. Vendy sipped the tea in the cup. Agatha said that the influence between witches and magic power is mutual. The more powerful a witch was, the stronger her body and the longer her lifespan would be. If it weren't for the cruelty of the war, those transcendents might still be alive now. She looked up at the sky. And your magic power is even higher than theirs. That is to say, you may be the one who can live the longest among us. Leaf did not answer. Instead, she showed a trace of loneliness, but Vendy did not notice. By the way, it's not just these 2 points. Even your appearance is related to your magic power level. She paused for a moment. The legendary Queen of Fallen Star, Alice, is devastatingly beautiful. Even Pasha and the others have admitted it. Vendy withdrew her gaze and carefully looked at her for a moment. Well, I do feel that you've become a little different from before. How should I say it? The moment you descended from the shade of the tree, you looked like a forest fairy. It's really enviable. Leaf helplessly rolled her eyes at her. This doesn't sound like something the gentle and caring Vendy would say. Who knows? Maybe I didn't have the mood to think about such a problem before? Vendy laughed. Apart from gritting your teeth and surviving, what magic power can achieve, what it will become in the future, whether it's ugly or beautiful, are just superfluous things. That's true. Leaf curled her lips. Now you're starting to think about the influence of magic power on your appearance. Is it possible that you also have someone in your heart? That's 2 different things. Besides, you're not much younger than me. Aren't you afraid of following in my footsteps? Let's not talk about not much younger for now. I already have a forest, so what's there to be dissatisfied about? But even if you don't tell me, I have a way to find out. After all, I'm the one who provided honey with the animal messengers. Unfortunately, as the person in charge of the witch union, every report of hers has to be read by me first. The two teased each other and enjoyed the afternoon's harmonious conversation. It was not until the sun gradually set that Leaf returned to the topic at hand. So, are you leaving soon? Yes. Vendi stood up. I have to send Her Highness Anna and the others back. Seagull can't fly at night, so it has to take off before 4 o'clock. It seems that Paper can't spend the campfire party with her friends. Unlike other family members who took the train to visit, the little girl was directly transported to the front by glider. The scheduled return flight could not be delayed for a day because of her, nor could they leave her alone. There's no other way. Vendi spread out her hands. Whether it's for the sake of safety or the needs of Neverwinter, she can't spend too much time on the road. Let me help you call her. Leaf transformed back into her spirit form. Thank you. Leaf went into the trunk and appeared in front of Vendi after a few seconds. All right, she'll meet you at the landing field. She should be saying goodbye to her friends now. I'll send you there. Vendi nodded and turned around to wait for the balcony to descend. Well, Leaf suddenly said softly. What's wrong? She hesitated. Nothing, Vendi exhaled, turned around and said softly, don't keep your thoughts to yourself. I'm always willing to listen. I'm just a little what? A little. Leaf clenched her fists and was about to say something when she suddenly froze. She looked over Vendi's head and fixed her eyes on the north of the forest. Sensing the shock and surprise in her eyes, Vendi could not help but look in the same direction. She saw several wisps of black smoke rising from the dense forest like a slowly unfolding curtain. Chapter 1105. It was between spring and summer, when the soil was fertile. How could there be a fire in the forest? And it seemed that there was more than one fire. Leaf! Vendi shouted. I don't know. Leaf suddenly came to her senses. That place is beyond my fusion range. I can't sense the specific situation in the black smoke. If there's a fire, we have to stop it from spreading. I know. Leaf's expression was a little strange, as if she had mixed feelings. She bit her lip and nodded. Anyway, you go and meet with the others first. When the emergency plan is activated, the camp may be in chaos, and it won't be easy to leave by then. Now there were not only workers on vacation in the terminal, but also a large group of family members who had never been to the battlefield. It would not be easy to evacuate them in an orderly manner. Vendi soon realized this. Will you be okay by yourself? Don't worry. I know how to deal with it, Leaf said as she descended from the balcony. She glanced at Vendi for the last time and then jumped into the dense forest. A moment later, a shrill alarm rang over the misty forest. Yes, I got it. In the general staff of Tower Station Number 2, Philin Schilt put down the phone and turned to report to Edith. Madam, there's an accident on the Western Front. What did you say? There's a fire in the northern part of the forest? The Pearl of the Northern Region frowned. Did Miss Leaf see it? Yes. The evacuation plan has been activated. The soldiers of the First Army have entered a state of Level 2 alert. Inform the Commander-in-Chief and all the relevant senior officials. Edith thought for a moment and said decisively, tell them the General Staff needs to hold a pre-war meeting. Pre-war meeting? Philin repeated. Do you think it's... Yes, Edith said seriously. I suspect the fire is a new trick of the demons. In less than a quarter of an hour, the generals of the First Army and the representatives of the Witch Union gathered in the underground conference room. After the Pearl of the Northern Region explained the general situation, she told everyone the latest news she had received. The sentinel at the forest terminus has confirmed that the cause of the smoke is indeed a fire. Affected by the wind, the fire is quickly spreading toward the terminus. Only a forest fire, no traces of demons? Iron Axe asked in a deep voice. We haven't received any reports yet. Philin shook his head. The smoke is blocking our vision. No one knows what's going on behind the line of fire. Miss Sylvie, can you see anything? The concealing forest is too far from here, Sylvie replied, unless I go there myself. Damn it, at this time. Iron Axe glanced at the map. Where is Her Highness now? According to the original plan, Princess Anna and some witches would rendezvous with the flying team at the terminal of the forest and then take the Seagull back to Neverwinter. He should be on the returning Dark River one. After receiving the news of the fire, Miss Kant asked me to use the sigil of listening to inform them to change their itinerary. Good job, Iron Axe said with a sigh of relief. So only Her Highness and her party are left there? After getting a positive answer, he said to the Light of Dawn, tell them to take off immediately. Don't wait any longer. After dealing with the evacuation, Iron Axe looked at the staff of the General Staff. Now, tell me your opinion. Leaf stood at the top of a giant fir tree, looking at the rolling smoke in the distance. In just over an hour, the fire had expanded a lot. Now, not only was the smoke flying all over the sky pressing down on her, but she could also faintly see the flashing red light under the smoke. She seemed to hear the cries of the burning trees. Although it was not within her control, the heart of the forest was still trembling slightly, because it was also resonating in her heart. When facing Vendi, the word that she did not say was fear. After more than a year of annexing and merging, Leaf had gradually touched the essence of her ability. In a sense, it could indeed make her an immortal existence. All the plants incorporated into the heart of the forest would become a part of her. In other words, as long as the area of integration was larger, she would be more difficult to eradicate. After all, it was easy to clear a lawn, but it would be much more difficult to flatten a forest or an entire grassland. As for making the world barren, it was almost impossible. She remembered His Majesty once said that plants were the foundation of the natural world. Even if the whole world was destroyed, the earth was dug 3 feet deep, and the sky and earth were turned upside down, the first to appear on the surface would still be this group of tenacious creatures. But the problem was that at that time, she could no longer be regarded as herself. The clear spring flowing underground, the crawling insects in the soil, the trembling beehives on the trunks, the singing birds on the branches. These huge information constantly came from every corner of the forest and were engraved in her memory. If she suddenly accepted them, she would immediately lose her mind, which was why Leaf had to slow down the speed of integration. However, she found that even so, it was impossible for her to record so much information by herself. The reason why she had not become a lunatic was that the heart of the forest had made a choice for her. Countless intertwined roots and vines formed a huge consciousness, and magic power and memory were integrated into one, flowing in the forest. This meant that once the integrated forest was destroyed, she might lose part of her memory. Even if new seedlings grew out of the ruins, what she had lost would not come back. It might be her acquaintance with Vendi and Scroll, it might be her escape from the Witch Cooperation Association with Nightingale, Mystery Moon, and Lily, it might be the tender scene when she met His Majesty, it might also be her life in Neverwinter. She did not want to forget even Kara's stubbornness and prejudice, and the persecution and pursuit of the church, because these were her unique experiences and the proof of her existence in the world. She was afraid of losing them. At the thought that this fire might appear in the integrated misty forest, Leaf felt an indescribable pain in her heart. But she could not retreat, because all of this was to defeat the demons and win the battle of divine will. She could not selfishly abandon her sisters for her own sake. They were also contributing their strength, and she could not let them down. Thinking of this, Leaf took a deep breath, raised her hands, and looked up at the sky full of afterglow. In an instant, a dazzling green light bloomed from her chest. Please listen to my call and take action. At that moment, the whole forest was like an awakened giant, slowly raising its body. Countless trees bent backward and fell at the same time. Even the turf and soil were curled up like a carpet. It was hard to describe the momentum of the scene as an earthquake. Chapter 1106. Based on the current information, the General Staff's conclusion is roughly like this. Edith knocked on the table and said, "This arson is likely to be a diversion." A diversion? Iron Axe said in a low voice. You mean the enemy's goal isn't to cut off our supply line? The demons want to, but they can't do it. Edith pointed at the map and said, the distance from the Tequila ruins to the north of the terminus station in the forest is longer than the railway on the plain. It's more than 500 kilometers. How much red mist do they need to carry to reach the arson area and set up an ambush? I think our Tequila colleagues should know this very well. If they don't set up a bloodline and don't have an outpost, the army can't support such a long battle line. Phyllis, the representative of Tequila, paused for a moment and said, based on past experience, 500 soldiers is the demon's limit. The terminus station in the forest is a well-fortified station, which is like a small stronghold, Edith continued. His Majesty has made a plan a long time ago. Once the demons set fire to the forest, Miss Leaf will create a safe isolation belt to keep the fire out of the station. This isolation belt is also a natural shooting range without any shelter or cover. If the demons want to break through the firing net of several blockhouses, 500 soldiers will be as good as dead. Let's take a step back and say they really have a way to send their army into the misty forest without any supply line. Arson is a way to expose themselves. The light of dawn added, it might be better to launch a direct attack at night. After all, the forest itself is a kind of cover. Before entering the territory controlled by Lady Leaf, the demons can easily hide their movements. That makes sense. Iron Axe nodded and said, but Sylvie, Lightning, and Maggie haven't found any traces of the demons. If they plan to attack Tower Station number 1 again, I'm afraid it's too late now. This is also a puzzle that we haven't solved yet. Maybe the enemy has thought of a new way to deceive the detection, or maybe they've used a new weapon that we've never seen before, Edith replied frankly, but the diversion strategy doesn't require us to attack the east and the west. You mean Tower Station 0? Our current investigation focus is all in front of the railway, so we can't rule out this possibility. But the further the distance from the front line, the more troops the demons can send, Iron Axe said thoughtfully. That's right, Edith affirmed. I understand, the Commander-in-Chief said after a moment of silence. When Her Royal Highness returns safely, send the Black River number 1 to Tower Station 0, and number 2 to patrol between Station 0 and Station 1. The rest of the troops remained motionless and raised their alert level until the alarm was lifted. Besides, even if it's unlikely that the demons will attack from the north, it's better to put out the fire as soon as possible. He turned to look at Agatha. Can I ask you to do this? Don't worry, we'll do our best, the Ice Witch replied. The investigation at the front line remains the same, and the main target is still the Tequila front line. Miss Sylvie, leave it to me, Sylvie said with a nod. Iron Axe clapped his hands and said, judging from the current speed of the fire, it will probably reach the edge of the forest by evening. If the demons don't know that Miss Leaf can isolate the sea of fire on her own, they will bare their fangs when the sun sets. We still have about an hour. Let's get moving. Standing at the top of the watchtower, Sylvie felt a slight chill in the breeze that brushed her cheeks. The sun was setting, and the brilliant afterglow dyed half of the sky red. The vast grassland seemed to be dyed in 3 different colors. The furthest one was gold, shining as brightly as the sun, and the nearer one was red with a tinge of green. Against the blue sky, it looked like a sea of purple flowers. The grassland under her feet was covered in shadows, which were blue and black, which was the exclusive color of the night. Such a beautiful scene could only be seen in this boundless, barbarian land. However, it was also a countdown to the coming war. Every time the sun set, the enemies were one step closer to them. Under such a background, even the most moving natural scenery lost some of its beauty and became austere and bleak. Sylvie turned her head and looked to the southwest. Although the misty forest was not within the observation range of the Eye of Magic, she still took some time to look at it. She could not tell why, but she felt a little worried. In retrospect, whether it was the judgment of the General Staff or the order given by Iron Axe, there was nothing to nitpick about. Although it was not perfect, at least it was steady and prudent. Without the supply of red mist, the demons were like a nailed string. The longer the string was stretched, the weaker their strength would be. If the demons were really coming for the Forest Terminal and Tower Station 0, the garrison would be able to hold on until the reinforcements arrived. There was no doubt that the enemies would invest most of their strength in the front line of the railway. But why? Why can't I get rid of this worry? Sylvie shook her head and suppressed the distracting thoughts in her mind. When she was about to glance at the front line again, she suddenly saw a ball of light at the corner of her eye. Light? How? She widened her eyes in surprise and looked at the ball of light. It was bright red, like a dazzling flame. After jumping into her field of vision, it was moving quickly to the south. Strange, am I seeing things? The eye of magic should not be able to see that far. Yes, she could not see it. The darkness in her field of vision proved this. Beyond the range of the light, the eye of magic would lose its observation ability and shrink to an ordinary perspective. In the dim light, it was difficult to distinguish the boundary between the earth and the forest. It was basically pitch black. That was why the light was so eye-catching. Since it was not an illusion, what did she see? Sylvie suddenly felt a chill rising from the soles of her feet and up her spine, making her shiver uncontrollably. She knew what she was worried about. That was something that everyone had overlooked. What she saw was magic power, and it was an extremely powerful magic power. The observation range of the eye of magic was limited by its own limitations and could not spread its magic power further. However, when there was a powerful magic power source, the magic power would be reflected on the eye of magic and thus seen by her. It was like the sunlight shining through the closed eyelids. To be able to be directly sensed at this distance, the magic power of the intruder must have reached an astonishing level. The cursed demon. This was the only name left in Sylvie's mind. The humanoid alien from the Tequila ruins, the commander of the demon army. As a general, he was always the core of the army. When two armies fought, the general was like a chess player, and the outcome of the game was determined by the outcome. It was rare for a general to be bare-chested. However, they had neglected the fact that the intruder was also a powerful senior demon with terrifying combat power. At this moment, the speed of the red dot was still increasing. It was almost 3 times faster than Maggie's Devil Beast's flying speed. From the beginning, the intruder was targeting Leaf. Chapter 1107. But at this distance, it was impossible to warn the enemy. The speed of the red dot increased by a few notches and became even more distinct. What should I do? Yes, the phone. I can use the phone to inform Leaf. Sylvie slid all the way from the top of the watchtower to the underground conference room and shouted to the light of dawn, "Call Leaf and tell her to leave immediately." Ferlin realized that something big must have happened. Without asking why, he picked up a phone and shook the handle with all his might. "Leave. Where are you going?" "Anywhere is fine. Neverwinter, south of the forest. The farther away from the terminal, the better." At this time, all eyes in the conference room were focused on Sylvie. "Did you find anything?" Edith asked. "We guessed wrong. The enemy is aiming at Leaf, and there's only one of them." Sylvie looked to the southwest anxiously. Leaf needs to concentrate when she controls the forest, which is equivalent to an entity. As long as the enemy can see the flow of magic power, they'll be able to locate her. They set the forest on fire just for this moment. "What?" Edith suddenly frowned. "Can you also observe the demon's actions from here? Because the enemy's magic power is too strong," she murmured. "But Lady Leaf is also very strong," Philin interrupted. "If she doesn't rely on fire, even an army of mad demons can't do anything to her in a short time, right? But since the enemy has done this, they can't be unprepared." Sylvie could not help but clench her fists. The red dot in her field of vision had begun to rise rapidly, and its trajectory was like a raised snake head. "Is the phone still not connected?" "Yes. No one is answering." As expected, all of Leaf's attention is attracted by the fire. At this rate, the two will meet in 1 or 2 minutes at most. "Call the terminal," Edith said. "Ask the first army stationed there to inform Leaf and ask them to prepare for reinforcements." Philin turned around and picked up another phone. While waiting anxiously, Sylvie clearly saw that after the red light passed the apex, it fell straight down like an ominous meteor. Launching a frontal assault from the sky without any scruples, she had already vaguely guessed the worst answer in her heart. The enemy was probably the Magic Slayer. This should be enough. Leaf clapped her hands and let out a long sigh. The trees at the edge of the camp had been separated from the north side, so no matter how the fire burned, it would not threaten the safety of the terminus. However, when she saw the twisted and withered branches in the flames, she still felt a little uncomfortable. How many memories would she lose if she burned the forest under her control? How many of them were important and precious? Just thinking about it made him feel uncomfortable. Pull yourself together, Leaf. They still had to prepare to extinguish the fire. She silently encouraged herself and was about to walk around the camp to see if there was anything she could do to help. Suddenly, a whistling sound came from above and attracted her attention. Leaf looked up. It was almost night and the sky was dark purple, so it was difficult to see what was making the sound. "Be careful, quickly dodge," someone suddenly shouted. Before Leaf could see who it was, she subconsciously hid in the trees. At the same time, a black shadow fell from the sky and almost brushed past her face. The surrounding branches and leaves were instantly turned into powder. The moment the black shadow landed on the ground, there was no earth-shattering sound. It could even be said that it was silent. This strange scene made Leaf feel a strong sense of uneasiness. However, before she could do anything, a distorted ripple had already spread out with the black shadow as the center. The magic power that had been flowing smoothly suddenly froze. Then it broke into pieces like a mirror. Ah! Leaf only felt dizzy for a while, and then was forced out of the trunk by an irresistible force. After falling heavily on the ground, she could not help but taste something sweet in her throat. She opened her mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. It was not until then that Leaf saw the true face of the shadow. It was a tall and straight demon with extremely sharp facial features. Except for its dark blue skin and weird clothes, it was almost no different from a human. Just by standing there, it gave people an indescribable pressure. It was as if the air had become sticky. Leaf panted and propped herself up. No matter how hard she called out to the forest, it did not respond to her. It was not the first time that she had been forcibly cut off from the heart of the forest. The Magic Slayer. Her heart sank. However, the other party did not sneer nor howl. He only stretched out his 5 claws that were as sharp as blades and pounced towards her. Leaf clenched her teeth and closed her eyes. However, she did not feel the pain she had expected. Ding! A strangely shaped big sword was placed horizontally in front of her, blocking the opponent's sharp claws. The blade was as thick as a door, and the golden sun symbol on the blade was something that would never be forgotten once one saw it. Emissary Ashes. Your opponent is here, monster. Ashes blocked the Magic Slayer's claws and stood in front of Leaf. Ashes? Leaf's eyes widened in surprise. Didn't you return to Neverwinter with Princess Tilly? I saw the seagull with my own eyes. Yes, it should have been like that, Ashes said without turning her head. But I felt that the fire was a little strange, so I volunteered to stay. After all, if something goes wrong, I can also help, can't I? So that's why. She was the one who gave the warning. So, this is the Magic Slayer you met before? Yes, but you have to be careful. It's much stronger than the senior demon you met before. I can see that. Ashes held the big sword in front of her chest. Don't worry. I may not win, but I'll be fine as long as I can hold on until the reinforcements arrive. The demon looked in the direction of the campsite and then at the two coldly. Extraordinary. Although the demon's pronunciation was not fluent, it was undoubtedly a language that humans could understand. This was even more incredible than the Magic Slayer himself. In the long history of the Battle of Divine Will, no demon had ever communicated with a witch. You can speak our language? Leaf could not help but ask. Learning is the foundation of evolution. Only you will be surprised by this. The senior demon spread its arms. Countless things can change in hundreds of years, but you still act as if it was yesterday. Demons, extraordinary, and the titles haven't changed at all. It's pathetic. What did you say? Ashes shouted in a low voice. A gust of wind answered her. Chapter 1108. Ah! Suddenly, Leaf let out a cry of surprise. Ashes turned her head and found that the gust of wind that had swept over her body had not disappeared. Although it had weakened a lot, it still blew the leaves up. At the same time, the magic slayer appeared behind her. How is this possible? That cyclone is clearly a kind of ability. Why didn't the god's stone of retaliation completely seal its effect? Without much time to think, Ashes drew back her sword and slashed at the magic slayer's neck. However, the magic slayer blocked the attack with only one hand. As the two collided, she clearly saw the blue ripples on the demon's arm. The magic slayer did not even look at her. Instead, he raised the gale again and blew Leaf further away. This guy only wants to kill Leaf. Ashes followed closely behind the magic slayer, but the distance between them was gradually widening. Leaf tried to fight back, but the magic slayer simply waved his hand and all her efforts were in vain. This level gap could not be overcome with willpower. The flow of magic power in the space was disrupted, and it was difficult for her to gather her strength. Is this the senior demon's control of magic power? Whether it was interrupting Leaf's ability or taking the time to knock her back, it seemed to be doing it with ease. Ash's palms were sweating. If this went on, she would not be able to catch up with the opponent's fatal blow that could come at any time. At this critical moment, Ashes was more focused than ever. Faster, faster. For the past 2 years, she had been following the tequila's extraordinary training method and had been wearing weights most of the time. After taking them off, she could feel the changes in her body. The magic power attached to her muscles and bones grew stronger and stronger, constantly nourishing every corner of her body. She even had the illusion that the magic power was gradually replacing her flesh and blood. But this was not enough. She had to move faster to save Leaf, and to protect the people she wanted to protect. Driven by her consciousness, the magic power began to gather in her legs. During the holy duel with Lorgar, Ashes saw a strange fighting technique. When the magic power was focused on a certain part of the body, it could greatly increase the explosive power and endurance. This was also the reason why the wolf girl could change her limbs. The magic slayer did not focus on her, so she could focus on sensing the flow of magic power in her body. The fragmented surroundings made the feeling even clearer. When the demon used the same trick for the 4th time and pulled the distance between them to 20 meters, it directly broke through Leaf's vine defense and reached out its sharp claws to stab her chest. This attack seemed to be irreversible. Almost at the same time, Ashes used all her strength to kick the tree. In that instant, she felt that she had vaguely grasped something. Her body seemed to have turned into a bolt of lightning, covering the distance of more than 20 meters in the blink of an eye. It was as if time had stopped. Even without using her eyes, she could clearly see the scene of the tree being smashed to pieces, the wind brought up by the magic slayer's sprint, and the scene of weeds being crushed. For the first time, the magic slayer stopped and raised his hands to block her attack. Bang, bang. With all her strength, the magic slayer was sent flying a few meters away. He tumbled twice in the air and landed steadily on the ground. Ashes did not stop. She caught the falling leaf and once again shielded her behind her. Oh! The demon raised his eyebrows and showed a trace of interest. Open fire! At this moment, the reinforcements that Ashes had been waiting for finally arrived. The team of God's punishment witches stationed at the terminus of the forest jumped out of the dense forest and pulled the trigger of their shotguns at the only enemy in the forest. A deafening roar resounded through the forest. Bullets sprayed at the target like raindrops. The magic slayer used the tree trunks as cover and dodged to the left and right like a ghost. Even so, amidst the flying tree bark and debris, blue light could be seen from time to time on its body. Further away, there was the sound of hurried and chaotic footsteps. Apparently, after the God's punishment witches arrived, the first army was gradually closing in on the demon. The demon took one last look at Ashes and leaped into the air. An amazing burst of magic power burst out from its body. It quickly rushed up and disappeared into the boundless night in a few seconds. Damn it, the leading god's punishment witch spat. She walked up to Ashes and squatted down. My name is Elena. Are you okay? I'm fine. Ashes glanced at the semi-conscious Leaf in her arms and reached out to gently wipe the blood from the corner of her mouth. But she needs treatment. Don't worry, Elena comforted her. I've been informed by the front line that Miss Nana and Miss Nightfall are on their way. As soon as the Ascendant landed on the ground, a junior guard came forward to greet him. Lord Osrook, this is the breathing tank for you. Before he could finish, the man snatched the tank away and directly put it to his nose to take a deep breath. Hiss. After a long time, Osrook seemed to have recovered and said, "Replace it for me." After exhaling the waste tank, the guard inserted a new tank as long as an arm into his back. For the promoted, this breathing method did not rely on armor and would not hinder his movement, so it was an ideal way to carry him. What about your trip? A little bit, but it's within my expectations, Osrook said expressionlessly. After all, that's the humans' territory. If I couldn't even stop them, I would have to wonder if Kabardabi really betrayed us. No, they didn't stop the real you, the guard said loudly. The breathing tank limited your strength. If you were within the range of the birth tower, those bugs would be no match for you. Driving magic power would speed up the consumption of red mist, especially for the higher ascendants. Considering the amount of red mist needed to travel back and forth, it was like fighting with shackles on. So this is just a bait. Next time, I'll choose a fairer place. Osrook looked to the south of the forest and said, a cemetery suitable for eternal rest. If the Sky Lord could support you more, the guard said indignantly, you wouldn't have to take such a risk. The birth tower of Tequila is also. Risk? Osrook interrupted his subordinate. I think it's quite interesting. After all, it's better to experience it yourself than to listen to others' reports. It buckled a deformed steel ball from its armor and looked at it carefully for a moment. The females who are also awakened have not improved at all, but the males who have no magic power have changed. Those humans are not completely useless. It would be better if I could understand them more. The guard did not reply, but a look of indignation appeared on his face. Osrook put the steel ball into his arms disapprovingly. As for the Lord, I believe he must have tried his best. But the Lord must have his own concerns and difficulties, so there's nothing to be indignant about. After all, we're all fighting to reach a higher realm and reach the sky, aren't we? You are right. The guard lowered his head. Take the tombstone and retreat. There's still a long way to go back to Tequila. Osrook slowly flew up and turned to the direction of the holy city. Now that the bait has been laid, all we need to do is wait. Wait for the day when it tightens. Chapter 1109. 2 days later. Grey Castle, City of Neverwinter. That's pretty much what happened at that time. Ashes recounted the details of the battle. After the fire was extinguished, Lightning searched about 100 kilometers to the north and found some traces left by the enemy. According to the scene analysis, the traces were left by the spider demons when they passed through the forest. There weren't many of them, about 3 or 4. Due to the interruption of communication in the forest, Roland did not know that Leaf had been attacked until the next evening. The next morning, he immediately asked Tilly and Vendy to drive the Seagull to the terminal station and bring Leaf back to Neverwinter. Ashes was fine and seemed to be unscathed, but Leaves was carried off the plane. The silver lining was that Nightfall had planted the seed of symbiosis in her body. Even though Leaf was unconscious, the symbiosis did not seem to be in much pain. This meant that Leaf's mental exhaustion was far greater than her physical injuries. Roland suppressed his distracting thoughts and looked at the big map on his desk. He had a clear picture of the whole attack in his mind. The demon commander had indeed noticed the abnormality of the misty forest. After all, the railway line had taken a turn here and extended all the way to the Tequila ruins. However, it did not choose to attack the trenches and barbed wire fences at the terminal station. Instead, it directly targeted the witches. A small group of people traveled nearly 500 kilometers from the ruins of the Tequila ruins to the northern end of the forest. Such a long march was destined to be impossible for a large army to fight. Presumably, the spider demons were not only responsible for the arson mission, but also carrying a large number of red mist cans. In a sense, this was also a tactical operation by the enemy. Setting fire to the forest was just a pretense to attract the witches' attention. Now that he thought about it, whether or not there was an emergency strategy for the fire attack, the controller of the forest was very likely to stay in place and pay attention to the further development of the situation. This was the moment that the enemy seized. Perhaps in the eyes of the demons, it was Leaf who supported the logistics of the First Army. As long as they killed the forest controller, they would be able to resolve the crisis at the front lines and force the humans to retreat without a fight. Although there were some deviations in their intentions, the fact that they were able to come up with such a plan already showed the extent of the demons' understanding of magic. They accurately guessed the form of Leaf's ability and targeted her with the beheading attack. They relied on their individual strength to run a long distance and calculated the time needed to advance and retreat. It could be said that every step was closely linked. If one did not have a deep understanding of the use of magic power, it would be impossible to achieve this. He even suspected that the demons had seen abilities similar to Leaf's. Although it would take the enemy team at least 1 week to return by the original route, and it was not difficult to catch up with the spider demons by following their distinct tracks, it was meaningless for them to do so. The Magic Slayer, who could fly independently, could abandon the team and escape at any time. If they sent too few people to chase after the spider demons, they would be easily bitten, and if they sent too many people, they would only be able to kill a few spider demons and some low-level demons. Similarly, the enemy did not have any good countermeasures against the secret movements of such an elite team. Most of the important witches were protected by God's punishment witches, but for Leaf, Maggie, and Lightning, who were erratic, it was impossible to arrange a perfect protection plan. Fortunately, there were not many senior demons who could do this. Moreover, when the Magic Slayer ran at full speed, there would be obvious signs of magic power. As long as the enemy prioritized retreat, it would not be easy for them to succeed. Another thing that caught Roland's attention was the conversation between the Magic Slayer and Ashes. Demons can speak human language? As a senior demon, Caberdabi, who had been captured alive, did not have this ability. Without Camilla's mind connection, he could not even communicate with Caberdabi. Learning is the foundation of evolution. Countless things can change in hundreds of years, but you still live as if it were yesterday. Rumor has it that before the first battle of divine will, someone had come into contact with the demons. It was a human who passed on his knowledge to them. The words Ashes repeated and the rumors Pasha mentioned alternated in Roland's mind. For some reason, Roland felt that the Magic Slayer was proud when he talked about the past hundreds of years, as if he had witnessed countless vicissitudes of life. Could it be that it was a devil from the Union era? Or even earlier? Is that why it learned the human language? But this was too inconceivable. Just as Roland was deep in thought, Vendi's voice suddenly came from outside the office. "Your Majesty." She pushed the door open and said, "Leaf is awake." "I'm coming." Roland suddenly stood up and looked at Ashes. "Do you want to go with me?" The Transcendent nodded. "By the way," Roland said as he walked past her, "I forgot to thank you." Although Ashes looked unscathed, it did not mean that she was unscathed. Only when Roland got closer would he notice that there were several shallow wounds on her face and knuckles. The whirlwind that could blow Leaf away was not as gentle as a spring breeze. Normally, such small wounds would not stay on an extraordinary for more than a day, but they had not healed yet. In other words, once she made a mistake, she could suffer a fatal injury that could not be recovered. Obviously, the intensity of this battle was not as simple as she said. Ashes calmly accepted Roland's gratitude. She just slightly lowered her head and glanced at Roland with her golden eyes. "Treat Tilly well." "Of course, even if you didn't say it," Roland pursed his lips and understood what Pasha meant. This was the right thing to do, just like how she saved Leaf. It turned out that a straightforward extraordinary could also have such thoughts. He could not help but smile. Let's go. When Roland walked into Leaf's bedroom, the room was already full of people. Anna, Nightingale, Tilly, Scroll, Mystery Moon. Almost all the witches who joined the union in the first batch had gathered here. When they saw Roland, they all made way for him. In the crowd, he saw Leaf, who had already sat up. Her green hair was a little messy, and her face was a little pale, but she did not look too haggard. Her eyes were still bright. "Your Majesty," Leaf said in a low voice, "I've made you worry. It's good that you're fine." Roland breathed a sigh of relief. Her previous coma was indeed caused by mental exhaustion. But he also knew that it was a little forced to say, "It's good that you're fine." Leaf had also suffered from a curse, similar to Lightning's. She still had internal injuries caused by the forcible interruption of the heart of Forest State. At most, it was not life-threatening. "I've already heard about the specific situation from Ashes. You just have a good rest and don't worry about the forest for the time being. As for your injuries, I'll definitely find a way." She shook her head and said, "No, Your Majesty, please let me go back to the front." Nightingale could not help but cry out. "I know what everyone is thinking, but me lying on the bed won't help the situation at all, right?" Leaf spoke very slowly, but her tone was very clear. Whether in the misty forest or in Neverwinter, the curse won't disappear. In this case, there's no point in resting. "But," Vendi murmured, "as long as I stay in the forest for a day, the communication between the two places can be maintained, and the experimental fields won't be abandoned. I can also help transport the supplies needed by the front lines. This will more or less be of some help to the goal of defeating the demons. Comparing the two, it's clear which is the better choice, isn't it?" She slightly panted and tried to smile. "Don't worry. This time, if I see something wrong, I'll definitely retreat." Everyone was speechless for a moment. Roland took a deep breath. What? He should have guessed it earlier. If Leaf had not been like this, how could she have walked all the way from the impassable mountain range to border town barefoot and brought all her surviving sisters back here? She was just like the forest. Beneath her soft appearance, there was a tough heart. "I see." After a moment of silence, Roland nodded and said, "But you have to promise me that before the magic slayer with the power of the curse is killed, you can't act alone at any time." Then he looked at Ashes and said, "Can you take care of her during this period?" Chapter 11:10. Back at the Sleeping Spells residential area, Ashes heard Tilly coughing behind her as soon as she closed the door. "Ahem, do you understand what Roland meant by taking care of her?" She could not help curling up the corner of her mouth and deliberately replied in a confused tone, "Isn't it exactly what it means? Stay by Leaf's side, like taking care of a patient. She's injured, so it must be very inconvenient for her too." "Hey!" This time, Ashes couldn't help but smile, revealing the corners of her mouth. "So you were lying to me. Don't worry, I know what I should do." She turned around and blinked. His Majesty just wanted to use the Extraordinaire's unique perception of magic fluctuations to warn Leaf in advance, just like how I met you. If not for this ability, you would not have seen me in the crowd with my hands covered in blood. "I'm not a demon," Tilly said with her arms crossed. "It's just an example." Ashes waved her hands in surrender. "After all, I'm the only one who has fought with the Magic Slayer, right? What happens after the warning? Of course, we'll approach the reinforcements and work together to defeat the enemy." "Really? I'm not Princess Tilly of the Wild Flame clan, who wants to challenge every opponent." Ashes smiled. "As long as her magic is not blocked, Leaf can cross the entire forest in an instant. There's no point for me to stay here." "Phew." Tilly exhaled. "Don't forget what you said." "Of course." She walked up to Princess Tilly and looked her in the eyes. "I'll be with you for a long time. That girl was born into a noble family and doesn't know how to take care of people. She thinks she can fight. How can I trust her to take care of you?" What are you talking about, silly? Tilly glared at her and walked back into the house grumpily. When she reached the door, she suddenly stopped and said in a low voice, I am actually very happy that you can save Leaf. Ashes was slightly stunned. If you're only protecting me, it's a waste of your abilities. Tilly turned around and said, although you always say that it's the safest choice for me to go back to Sleeping Island, you actually like it here, don't you? Now you smile a lot more than before. Is that so? She couldn't help but touch her cheek. Even when we were on Sleeping Island, you rarely smiled. You always had a straight face, as if you were always waiting to fight with your enemy. Tilly continued, I'm afraid that even you didn't notice it, but the new witches are very afraid of you. Only an innocent girl like Maggie can mess with you. But now, not only do you get along well with the Witch Union, I heard that you have an admirer? You mean, Lorgar? No, she's just more familiar with me. It's probably because we often spar. That's good, Tilly interrupted. Compared to the Avenger of the past, I prefer to see you now. But... She paused and said, this doesn't mean that you can do whatever you want. Do you understand? After a short silence, Ashes replied, I understand. Very good. Tilly nodded with satisfaction. Maybe I can go to the battlefield with you soon. Oh? Is there any progress on the Aerial Knight project? Roland said that he's trying to combine a new power source with the glider. If it's successful, we can build a new type of glider that can fly freely without Vendi. Tilly said excitedly, but the first thing to be completed is a special glider specially built for me. It said that it can fly higher and faster than devil beasts. His Majesty won't let you go to the battlefield and... I've already made an agreement with him. Ashes smiled and didn't say this out loud. I'll go to see it on the day of the test flight. Okay, then I'll take a shower first. My back is sticky after flying the Seagull for a whole day. See you later. You really don't want to shower together? Don't even think about it. Tilly said and slammed the door. Ashes sat down on the bench in the living room and looked at her palms. She could still remember the last strike she had slashed at the demon. At that time, she felt as if she had stepped into a new realm. Even if it was only for a second, it was enough to leave a deep impression. Whether it was vision, movement, or reaction, it was as if she had been separated from the surrounding world. Only magic power was left to accompany her. The overly strong torrent of magic burned her and gave her unparalleled strength. Ashes even felt that the power was responding to her call and tempting her to go further. Magic power not only affects our bodies, but also our temperament. If we desire to use magic power to achieve a certain goal, it will guide us in that direction. So, what are you fighting for? The words of the god's punishment which Phyllis during the first expedition to the wilderness rang in her ears. Why are you telling me this? Because you are an extraordinaire. You were born with unimaginable potential. However, in order to truly cross that hurdle, one must have a realistic goal and a firm will. According to the records of the Union, all the transcendents above the transcendent level were promoted in battle, and those who couldn't overcome this hurdle all died in the hands of the demons. I hope you can be the former. Transcendence. Did the three chiefs of the Union also face the same choice? Ashes clenched her fists. Right now, she probably already knew the answer. Roland returned to his office and picked up the call to the administrative office. Connect Barav. Yes, Your Majesty. Soon, the chief's voice was heard from the receiver. What are your orders, Your Majesty? When will the next primary education examination be held? According to the plan, it will be in a week. The number of participants is estimated to be 2,650. It seemed that the timing was just right. Roland calculated in his mind. Make a manpower plan. I need to transfer a group of people to implement the new project. Tentatively, about 500 people. Yes, Your Majesty. The current city of Neverwinter was like a huge melting pot that attracted people from all over the kingdom. After completing primary education, they were immediately assigned to various jobs. On the production line, a large number of experienced producers could easily accept these newcomers who had just entered the industry. After the small handicraft workshop model was broken, it became a process system instead of a private collection of knowledge. It became a matter of course for the old to teach the new. When a large number of newcomers became experienced workers, the production scale would be further expanded and more people would be recruited. The foundation that Neverwinter had accumulated over the years could automatically realize this cycle. When the number of people and resources in the melting pot reached a certain scale, the industrialization would be unparalleled. After hanging up the phone, Roland took out a thick stack of blueprints from the drawer. Since the night attack at Tower Station Number 1, he had prepared a lot of plans for the universal response, most of which were collected in the dream world. What he needed to do now was to localize them according to the actual situation in Neverwinter. Among the plans, there was a weapon that was very suitable for the current situation. "You have a new idea?" Nightingale appeared from the mist. Chapter 11:11. Well, it looks like a thick bamboo pole. Nightingale leaned over and asked, "What's its name?" "RPG." Roland smiled and said, "Ancestor." "RPG." Nightingale repeated awkwardly. "What a strange name. Is it someone's code name? Is it to commemorate the invention of this weapon?" Roland shook his head with a smile. "It has many names and forms in the dream world, but this is the most popular one. Due to its popularity, a group of believers also appeared, and it even gradually evolved into a religion, the Pan-RPG religion. Like the legendary dual swords of salvation and devastation." Nightingale's interest was piqued. "Is it really that powerful?" The so-called dual swords of salvation and devastation was a sacred weapon described in an epic biography passed down by the ancient witches. Before the first battle of divine will, there had been a fanatical organization that wanted to find it. Although it was only a story, it was somewhat similar. "You can think of it as a pan-RPG, Roland said. "After all, the dual swords of salvation and devastation all belonged to the category of RPG, and it undoubtedly contributed to world peace. But its ancestor is much weaker. But you can't directly jump to the level of RPG and pan-RPG, so you can only start from the ancestor of RPG and slowly improve it, right?" Nightingale said with a look of sudden realization. "Exactly." Roland was gratified. After so many years of being influenced by what he saw and heard, he finally found someone who could keep up with his pace. "You're quite perceptive." "Of course. Things are always progressive, aren't they?" Nightingale said proudly and threw a piece of dried fish into her mouth. "Like the black ribbons and madam you sometimes mentioned. Aren't they the progressive forms of gliders and stone ships? I've learned a lot by following you for so long." "Air." Roland coughed and said, "Forget about them. Whether it was the battle at the northbound slope or the night attack at Tower Number 1, they all had the same problem. Ordinary soldiers could not pose a threat to the senior demons. According to the Union's intelligence, the senior demons had more than one ability, and there was no obvious pattern to their abilities. However, it seemed that using magic to create a barrier to resist damage seemed to be their innate ability. Perhaps this was just a coincidence, or perhaps it was the best solution that the enemy had obtained after a long battle. Devils that didn't possess this ability would have long since been reduced to ashes. No matter what, it was never wrong to prepare for the worst. This barrier was similar to Shavi's ability, but it could only protect the surface of the body, and there was a limit to how much damage it could withstand. If it stood in place for a squad to hit multiple targets at the same time, it would probably only last for a few seconds. The problem was that the enemy was not a target. If an infantry squad of the First Army attacked the senior demon first, the senior demon would react after 1 or 2 shots. Then, the senior demon would either hide or wait for an opportunity to counterattack. Originally, the gods' punishment witches were responsible for suppressing the senior demons. They were born to suppress the senior demons. Not only were they as powerful as extraordinaries, but they could also block the enemy's ability. They could be said to be a tit-for-tat existence. However, the senior demons, who were supposed to be the commanders of the army, had appeared on the front lines several times. According to this trend, the 300 gods' punishment witches were not enough. He needed a weapon that could effectively increase the firepower of individual soldiers. RPGs looked great, but rocket-propelled grenades made it impossible for Neverwinter to mass-produce this legendary weapon in a short time. Even the simplest rocket engine was a power system that included fuel and combustion chambers. It was not easy to make one. If Anna had to make and debug it, it would be a waste of its original purpose. Therefore, Roland decided to get rid of the rocket-propelled grenade and leave it with a grenade. It was the ancestor of RPGs, the recoilless grenade. The most famous representative weapon in history was the Iron Fist. Although many people collectively referred to this type of weapon as a rocket launcher, in fact, they were two different types of weapons. The biggest difference was that the rocket launcher fired a rocket, which had its own power source and could be launched normally without a barrel. For example, the famous 107 rocket launcher could be ignited by dry batteries with a good accuracy by piling a mound of soil on the ground. The Iron Fist and the RPG were recoilless cannons that needed a barrel to create a recoil force. If it was ignited on the ground, it would only spin on the spot and would not fly away even if it was 1 meter away. Especially for the latter, the rocket at the tail of the warhead was mainly used to increase the range and accuracy, and the power it needed to shoot out was still provided by the propellant. Compared with the constantly evolving younger generations, the biggest advantage of the Iron Fist was its simplicity. The barrel was a straight cylinder, the warhead was made of thin iron sheets, and the propellant was black powder, which was very suitable for large-scale production. Of course, Roland did not intend to copy the Iron Fist, because its simplicity was also its biggest weakness: short range, poor accuracy, and low power, which were all unbearable shortcomings. As a person who learned from history, he naturally knew that some extremely small changes could greatly improve the performance of the weapon. For example, if he installed a gourd-shaped Laval nozzle at the tail of the launcher, it could accelerate the ejected gas from subsonic to supersonic speed, thereby increasing the recoil force and the range of the warhead. If he added a grip, a sight, and a wooden sleeve to the barrel, it could effectively improve the shooting experience and shooting accuracy. He could also install a tail made of soft steel on the body, which would automatically open and rotate with the body to increase its stability. In addition, if he pressed the front part of the warhead into a hollow inverted cone, the explosive energy could be gathered forward, forming a condensed energy armor-piercing effect, which would greatly increase the destructive power of the magic barrier. These improvements were all within the limits of Neverwinter's industrial technology. Roland closed the drawing, stood up, and walked to the French window. Admittedly, even if the First Army was equipped with a large number of individual grenades, it would not be able to completely offset the advantage of the senior demons, but at least the ordinary soldiers had the ability to at least compete with the senior demons. No matter how mobile the senior demons were, the armor-piercing grenades shot from their blind spots were still fatal. As long as they hit the target, the outcome would be completely different. This also meant that with a little bit of training, any ordinary person could be equipped with the means to kill a senior demon. In addition, armored units, such as the spider demons and the giant skeletons, would not be so helpless against them. And the cost of the above was only a small cluster of gunpowder and half a steel ingot. Chapter 11-12. Joe sat cross-legged on the ground and stared blankly at the 7 crooked bars beside his feet. They were the marks of the number of days. Every day that passed, he would dig a line in the ground with his fingers. Today was the 7th day. He did not dare to think about whether Farina was still alive or whether Lorenzo was still torturing her. Whenever he thought about it, he would feel a stabbing pain in his heart. Joe began to wonder if he had made the wrong choice. Although Sean had agreed to his request and had not been mistreated, Grey Castle was too far away from the kingdom of Wolfheart. It would take at least a month for the king of Grey Castle to make a decision and send troops to the kingdom of Wolfheart. It would take even longer if he had to discuss, consider, and prioritize other matters. He was not confident that Roland Wimbledon would deal with the internal strife of the church like he dealt with domestic politics. It was even possible that Roland would refuse. In that case, all his efforts would be in vain. Joe lowered his eyes and looked at the chain around his ankle. It connected him to the foot of the bed and was about the length of a man. Perhaps he could use this chain to... Hey, are you awake? The tent flap was suddenly lifted and the dazzling light shone in, causing Joe to squint. You're still awake. In that case, come with us. Go, where? The sudden light seemed to interrupt his train of thought. His mind was as blank as the ground. To the kingdom of Wolfheart, of course. Aren't you in a hurry to save your lover? Joe's eyes gradually adjusted to the sunlight. It was Sean who was standing in front of him. Then a key was thrown to him. Joe finally realized the meaning of Sean's words. He grabbed the key with trembling hands and said, Is it? His Majesty has approved the rescue plan and decided to take you back to Neverwinter for trial, Sean said calmly. The team in charge of this operation has arrived at Coral Bay. After meeting up with them, we can head directly to Archduke Island. Already arrived? How could it be so fast? Joe could not believe his ears. But now was not the time to think about this. Joe opened the lock in a flurry. He staggered as he stood up, but he managed to stand up straight. If you feel unwell, no, please take me there. He pleaded eagerly. The corners of Shaoan's mouth curled up slightly. Then come. Charles looked back at the mark on the ground. The twisted horizontal bar was imprinted with a silver edge by the sunlight, as if it was shining brightly. He didn't know what kind of future awaited him, but he finally saw a glimmer of hope. Charles took a deep breath and followed the guard out of the tent. One day later, Coral Bay. This was the easternmost port in the Kingdom of Dawn. Compared to the ports closer to Grey Castle and the fjords, this port was undoubtedly much more deserted. Ever since the church had swept through the Kingdom of Wolfheart and the Kingdom of Everwinter, the situation had worsened. The royal family had fallen, and the nobles were fighting for power. Even now, the two kingdoms were still in chaos, and the trade had declined significantly. Most of the ships docked at the pier were flying the flags of the Chamber of Commerce of the fjords, while ships from the two northern kingdoms were rarely seen. Among these sparse ships, there was one that was rather eye-catching. It had no sail, and black smoke was rising from the top of its head. Large wooden wheels were hanging on both sides, and the hull seemed to be made of stone. The legendary stone ship of Grey Castle. Joe thought. Although he had long heard of its existence, it was the first time he saw it with his own eyes. As soon as they boarded the deck, two people immediately came to greet them. It was a man and a woman. Joe's eyes quickly swept over the two people, and his heart sank slightly. For some reason, he vaguely felt that the woman was somewhat familiar, as if he had seen her somewhere before. Ah, it's Lady Zoe and Lady Betty, Xiaoan greeted them warmly. Did His Majesty entrust this mission to you? Because we happened to be in Neverwinter at that time, and we've been to the Kingdom of Dawn before. The woman shrugged. If it wasn't for His Majesty, I really wouldn't want to come so far away. The front line is already fighting with the demons, so I should stay there. By the way, instead of calling you lady, I'd rather you call me Mississippi, the man grinned. Unlike Zoe, I'm one of the last ones to wake up. It's only been 100 years since then. 100 years isn't old enough? The woman glanced at him. But it's strange. In the dream world, those people all fought to call me Mississippi. Of course, it's not impossible for Her Majesty. Then call me Mississippi, Xiaoan looked a little helpless. If you think it's better this way. Wait, what are they talking about? Joe looked at him blankly. Lady? Miss? No matter how he looked at it, this person was a man. And what did it mean that they had already fought with the demons? The bloody moon did not appear, so what was the demon they were talking about? Is this the last priest of the church? The woman called Zoe looked at him up and down. The hope of the Queen of Starfall City was turned into a tool for stupid people to fight for power. Although we used to be enemies, I still feel sorry for her. So, it's a kind of reincarnation for us to end all this. The other man nodded. Since everyone is here, let's go. Everyone is here. Joe did not pay attention to the inexplicable words and quickly looked around. This stone ship was not big enough to accommodate an army, but there were no other ships of Grey Castle around. Your Excellency. Joe gritted his teeth and asked. The one who answered him was Zoe. The rescue team you mentioned is here. Here. As if to verify his guess, the woman pointed at herself and then at Betty. She and I are the whole team. Joe looked at Xiao and in horror. Your Excellency. Lorenzo has a God's punishment army, 5 people, no more than 10 at most, right? Sean interrupted him. Joe stared at him blankly and could not even answer with a yes. But why do the 3 of them look so relaxed? That's a monster with an extraordinary body. Ignorance leads to fearlessness. How is that possible? Joe was not sure about the others, but Grey Castle had fought with the God's punishment army in Coldwind Ridge, so they should know this kind of terrifying warrior only better than the church. Even if they had powerful firearms, attacking the castle would weaken their advantage in shooting range. Once they entered a narrow area and encountered Scourge, it would be difficult for them to kill him instantly. After all, they were not afraid of pain and would not stop killing until they could not move. According to his plan, at least 1 to 200 people should enter the castle separately and kill the enemies one by one. Only then could they take down the castle at a low cost. If the number of people was lower than that, the casualties would increase significantly. But 2 people? How was that possible? Chapter 11-13. More than enough. Translator, Transan editor, Transan facing such an exaggerated statement, Joe should have laughed or tried to persuade him. However, he was rendered speechless by Krone's confident look. What was even more incredible was that he was going to be involved in this operation. He was asked to cooperate fully and tell everything he knew, which was not out of Joe's expectation. Since the king of Grey Castle had promised to rescue Farina, he must have a detailed understanding of the situation on Archduke Island. They had been lurking on the island for half a year, so they were naturally the most familiar with the situation. Of course, Krone might also interrogate him about other things, which Joe planned to tell him at the same time. Farina's life was more important than the secrets of the church and the sacred texts of the gods. He was willing to tell them everything he knew. However, when he entered the cabin, Joe found that he knew nothing about Roland Wimbledon, his old rival who had fought against the church for many years and finally destroyed the holy city of Hermes. It was neither an intelligence interrogation nor a war meeting. Sitting at the end of the long table was Cajun Fells, the master dramatist from Grey Castle. Just answer whatever he asks, Sean said and left the cabin. After saying this, Sean left the cabin, leaving behind a stupefied Charles, who stared blankly at Sean. When he was still in the new holy city, he had watched Cajun's troupe on tour. Although it had been almost 10 years, he could still remember that the old man in front of him was Cajun. What was the king of Grey Castle thinking? What came with the ship was not the army, but the famous drama troupe. Did this team really come to save people? Have a seat, my boy. Cajun nodded at him. Would you like some tea or wine? Tea would be fine. A beautiful woman quickly brought him a cup of hot tea. This is my student, Miss Rentgen. Thank you, Joe replied in a daze. If it were not for the shackles on his wrists and ankles, he would have thought that he was in a dream. Why you here? Because of an agreement with His Majesty, Cajun said with a smile. Cajun smiled. We should have talked in a more comfortable environment, but they wouldn't agree to take off your handcuffs. No, that's fine. He murmured. What do you want to ask me? It's about Farina's story and your story. Charles looked at him in disbelief. Are you referring to the matter between me and her? That's right. When did you join the church? How did you meet her? How did she fall into Lorenzo's hands? I want to know everything, Cajun said slowly. Farina. At the mention of this name, the pain surged. He had been trying his best not to think about her, but the memories were like a tide. Once they started, it was difficult to stop. As soon as he opened his mouth, the words were choked in his throat, and his vision became blurry. Farina was just an ordinary civilian girl when she first joined the church. When she first joined the church, her loose, coarse robe was covered with dirty patches. Her hands and feet were swollen from the cold and looked like frozen carrots. On the way to the Hermes Plateau, she would have died if she had not met the carriage he had hired. He was a poor noble who had nothing but his surname. He joined the church just to try his luck. The holy city did not care about one's background, and they would not reject any convert. Since he could read, he was assigned to the department of clergy and became a scribe. Farina, on the other hand, became a trainee warrior. That made Charles very unhappy. Clergy and warriors were equal organizations in the holy city. In other words, a commoner girl had become a person of equal status to him. Moreover, he had saved her by accident. In his eyes, Farina should be a cook, a washerwoman, or some other kind of servant. What annoyed him even more was that after recuperating for a period of time, he actually grew quite well. Therefore, the reason why she was chosen as a warrior was very suspicious. He should have been the one to enjoy it. Taking advantage of his position, he often bullied Farina, and even humiliated her in front of her. Farina did not talk back, which encouraged his arrogance. But in the next few years, this young woman gradually revealed her own talent, like a gem that was gradually being carved into shape. Farina was soon promoted from a trainee warrior to a reserve of the Judgment Army, and then to the official Judgment Army captain. During the months of demons, Charles could always see her figure on the wall of the stronghold. But he had just been promoted from a scribe to a clergy assistant. She was already superior to him. He used to pay close attention to Farina's every move for fear that she would retaliate against him. However, the latter had never taken any action, and his attention had turned into a habit. Charles gradually found that she was not as ordinary as he thought. Then Prince Roland of Grey Castle came. The Pope died, the gods' punishment army was destroyed, and the cathedral collapsed. The huge church of Hermes seemed to fall apart overnight. Countless believers fled the holy city that night. Farina was ordered to support the crumbling Judgment Army. She also pulled him out of the crowd during the civil strife. If it were not for that hand, he would have been trampled into meat paste by the refugees. At that moment, he seemed to understand something. After the defeat in Coldwind Ridge, Farina was not the highest person in the church. There were still the officiant, the presiding judge, and the senior commander in the holy city. The reason why the responsibility of defending the holy city was handed over to her was not so much because they valued her, but because they wanted to shirk and abandon her. The same was true when Tucker Thor was elected as the acting pope. Everyone knew that it was impossible to defend the holy city, but no one was willing to take the blame. At the same time, they needed someone to temporarily stabilize the situation in the holy city, so as to buy time for their escape. Therefore, the miracle of a woman in her 20s becoming the supreme commander of the Judgment Army appeared in Hermes. Ironically, she tried her best to restore the order in the old and new holy cities, but the number of senior officers who stayed was getting fewer and fewer. It was not uncommon for people to leave and leave at night. When the months of demons ended, there were only about 500 judgment warriors left in the holy city. She was thrown to Roland Wimbledon by those people, as a sacrifice to buy time. Did Farina know nothing about it? No, she knew the meaning of this responsibility from the beginning. But she still stood up without hesitation and spared no effort to do her best. Just because the church accepted her and trained her until now. Just like she never retaliated against him, not even scolded him. Just because he gave her a lift. Seeing Farina drenched in sweat running back and forth, standing on top of the city wall and shouting loudly, Charles felt something touched in his heart. Her small figure swaying under the white snow was so eye-catching. The sweat dripping from the tip of her nose was more dazzling than a gem. For Charles, the church was just an opportunistic place. He should have left long ago, but he chose to stay. It had nothing to do with God. He made a vow to Farina in his heart, swearing allegiance. It was not the loyalty of the believers to the commander of the Judgment Army. It was the loyalty of the knight to follow the guardian. Chapter 11:14. 2 days later, Joe was taken out of his room and stepped onto the bow deck. "Is that Earl Lorenzo's territory?" Sean asked. In the morning sun, the seawall glowed with golden light, and a vague gray and white shadow floated above it. Joe's heart tightened. He could not help but grasp the railing tightly and lean forward, fearing that he would miss any detail. Yes, that's the Archduke Island. He finally came back with the rescuer. Farina, please hold on a little longer. There are 2 docks on the island, facing east and west respectively. Joe took a deep breath and said impatiently, ever since Lorenzo became a noble, the docks had been guarded by guards. But mainly to guard against other nobles in the kingdom of Wolfheart, merchant ships are not strictly inspected. The problem is the castle district, which is heavily guarded. Without a special permit, you can't even enter. He had been holding it in for a long time. Over the past 2 days, Cajun Fells had asked him many questions, but none of them were related to the mission, let alone the secrets of the church. Cajun asked Farina in great detail about his prejudice against her, his insults, his escape, and how they helped each other. When he could not express himself in words, Cajun even asked his disciple, Rentgen, to pretend to be Farina and try to reconstruct the scenes in his memory. Except for mealtimes, he could not even see Sean and the others. It was as if they did not care about the rescue mission at all. Therefore, Joe seized the opportunity to speak his mind as fast as he could. Regardless of whether the other side would listen to him or not, as long as it was useful, he would have a better chance of rescuing Farina. You don't have to worry about that. We have our own ways, Sean interrupted him. I asked you to meet someone and get to know him. Who is it? The guide of this mission. After he finished speaking, he whistled, and 2 sailors quickly escorted a middle-aged man over. Charles recognized the man at a glance. Hagrid, you traitor. Hagrid was also a follower of the church. Before he was transferred to assist Bishop Lorenzo, Hagrid had been Joe's superior. Hagrid said disdainfully. You speak as if you are loyal to the church. If Farina finds out that you've sided with Greycastle, who knows who she'll call a traitor? Charles was at a loss for words. There's no need to argue. Sean stood between the two. Mr. Hagrid, you should know your mission, right? Facing the king's personal guard, Hagrid's voice immediately became much softer. Yes, my lord. Bring those 2 warriors into the castle. This is your only chance to redeem yourself. Whether you can grasp it or not is up to you. Entering the castle is not a problem, but sir, are you sure that only 2 will be enough? He was actually worried about Greycastle? Joe was stunned for a while before he came to his senses. No matter how many people Hagrid brought in, it would be an intolerable betrayal to Lorenzo. If Greycastle failed, he would not have a good ending either, so he might as well hope that Hagrid could be more thorough. Don't worry. You'll soon see. Sean looked at the outline of the Archduke Island and sneered. They're the real scourge who has obtained power. In the dead of night, the 6 members of the rescue team left the dock and headed for the castle. In addition to Zoe and Betty, there were 2 soldiers from the First Army. Obviously, they were responsible for guarding Joe and Hagrid. With the Count's trusted aide as a guide, the journey could be said to be unimpeded. Even if the patrol team came to question them, they would be dismissed by Hagrid with a few words. The same went for the guards at the entrance of the castle. Even though the other 5 people were all wearing hoods, the guards did not question them. From this point of view, Hagrid was indeed trusted by Lorenzo. After passing through the courtyard, the Lord's castle appeared in front of them. According to Hagrid, Farina's attack had frightened Earl Lorenzo so much that he had gathered all the God's Punishment Army soldiers who could still move into the bedroom in the main building. There were no more than 6 of them. The bedroom door had also been replaced with a solid copper door. It was said that ordinary people could not even push it open, let alone break the lock. Usually, Scourge had to open the copper door to get in and out of the bedroom. It's not difficult to trick Lorenzo out of the bedroom. You just need to say that you've found the secret of the treasure, Hagrid said as they walked. But he'll definitely take Scourge with him. Besides, strangers in the hall will make the guards even more vigilant. We have to find a way to fool them. No need. Just tell us which floor the bedroom is on. Zoe shrugged. Then take Joe to the dungeon and rescue the woman. As for how we fight, it's none of your business. Hagrid was stunned for a moment before he replied, yes. I got it. He straightened his bow tie, climbed the stone steps and knocked on the side door. An old gatekeeper poked his head out and said, "Lord Hagrid, why didn't you inform us beforehand that you were coming back? Cut the crap. I have something important to report to the Earl. Get out of the way." Okay. The old man hurriedly stepped aside to make way for Hagrid. "But these people are my informants in the Cage Mountain. Why, do you want to pry into the Earl's secret?" "I dare not." The old man immediately lowered his head. After entering the room through the side door and passing through 2 partitions, they entered the castle. The guards at the entrance of the hall had been replaced by armored family guards. Seeing them, 2 guards grasped the hilts of their swords at their waists and approached them. "Lorenzo's bedroom is on the 4th floor. But I can't take you up there," Hagrid said in a low voice. "Oh, isn't this Lord Hagrid? The Earl has been talking about you recently. Are these the guests that you invited?" The guard bowed and turned to Zoe and the others. "Please wait outside the hall unless the Earl approves. Wait, this lady." Zoe lifted her hood and slowly walked toward him. Before he could finish his warning, a hand grabbed his neck. "Lord Hagrid, this." The other guard did the same. Before he could draw his sword, Betty's hand had already grabbed his neck. With a crisp sound, the guard's neck was suddenly twisted into a corner. Hagrid and Joe could not help but gasp. Breaking a person's neck with one hand, was this something that a human could do? But that was not all. They carried the guards into the hall and hid themselves behind them. This strange scene made the remaining guards unable to react immediately. "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" No, look, their feet aren't on the ground." The dim firelight affected everyone's vision. When they realized something was wrong, it was too late. Zoe and Betty flashed out like shadows and pounced on the unprepared guards, aiming at their exposed necks. It was easy for people to relax during the long night watch, and their opponents just happened to be the strongest warriors among humans, extraordinaires. Joe could not help but cover his mouth. In just a few seconds, the remaining 4 guards' necks were also broken, and they fell to the ground in disorder. He had only seen such overwhelming strength and speed from the God's Punishment Army. But the God's Punishment Army was obviously a group of monsters without the ability to think. It was not difficult for them to tear their enemies apart with their bare hands, but it was almost impossible for them to kill them silently and cleverly like this. He saw the same shock on Hagrid's face. They have gained full power. They are the real scourge. Sean's words echoed in Joe's mind. Was this also Roland Wimbledon's masterpiece? He was not sure that His Holiness the Supreme Pontiff knew this secret the best. Next, act according to the plan. Zoe glanced at Joe. No matter whether the person you want to save is dead or alive, don't stay in the dungeon. Do you understand? I understand. After getting the answer, the 2 turned around and ran toward the stairs. There were no guards on the stairs, so Zoe and Betty went straight up to the 4th floor. There were doors on both sides of the narrow corridor, which should be for maids or servants. At the end of the corridor was a huge metal door, which reflected a dark red light under the flickering candlelight. "It's really a copper door." Zoe raised her eyebrows. "What are you going to do?" Betty curled her lips. "If there's an iron lock behind it, I don't think it can be broken. Isn't that obvious? If there's no way, then we'll open a way." "I think that's true." Betty kicked open the wooden door next to the Lord's bedroom and strode into the room. A scream was heard. The maid, who only had a thin veil over her body, suddenly pulled up the quilt to cover her half-exposed chest. Who are you?" "Unfortunately, I'm not interested in girls." Betty untied her belt, and her robe slid down naturally, revealing a firearm with an astonishing caliber on her back. "If it's a handsome boy, you'll only make her more panicked." Zoe sighed and held the shotgun in her hand. 1, 2, 3. The 2 aimed the muzzles at the wall and pulled the triggers together. Deafening explosions sounded continuously. The interior walls made of bricks simply could not withstand the repeated bombardment of the 40mm ammunition. Under the flying debris, 2 rows of crooked bullet holes quickly appeared on the walls. Chapter 11:15. Amidst the smoke and dust, she immediately spotted the target of this operation. Count Lorenzo. Apparently, he had just woken up from a sweet dream. He was sitting on the edge of the bed and putting on his pants in a panic. Scourge, who was guarding the bed, had already pulled out his dagger and pounced on the collapsed wall. Breaking through the wall had obviously violated the bottom line of these bodies. As long as the prior order was to kill any enemy that broke into the room, even if the controller was unconscious, Scourge would automatically respond. "Betty!" Zoe shouted. "Understood." The latter followed closely behind, kneeling on one leg and clenching her hands into bowls. "Come on." Long-term training and cooperation had made the two of them telepathic. Zoe did not even look back and directly jumped backward. Betty caught her accurately. With a push of her hands, Zoe leaped into the air and flew over Scourge's head like a swallow. Then she grabbed the chandelier on the arched ceiling and swayed. In the blink of an eye, she was already on top of the bed. The spacious and luxuriously furnished bedroom provided a very comfortable space for the Lord to enjoy and also became her stage. Zoe directly raised the shotgun in the air. Time seemed to stop. Scourge was still turning around, but obviously it was too late for him to keep up with her. Betty, on the other hand, had her back to the big bed and put on a victory pose. Obviously, this bad habit came from the dream world. Real men never turned around to look at explosions and the aesthetics of combat. She did not even consider that it was all magic movie special effects. However, seeing that Betty only tilted her body and was still paying attention to Scourge's movements, Zoe did not bother to argue with her. As for Count Lorenzo, he looked up in horror, his eyes full of disbelief. From the moment he fired the shotgun until now, only a few dozen seconds had passed. For him, he probably never thought that the defense line formed by Scourge would be so fragile. The chandelier fell apart under the tremendous force, and burning candles danced in the air like flickering fireflies. In the midst of the flames, Zoe aimed at the target and pulled the trigger. Boom! With a loud bang, time resumed its flow. A mist of blood instantly rose from the Count's body. Dozens of steel balls fell from above and almost completely enveloped him. Under the powerful impact, he first sank, then bounced up, and when he landed again, he was already twisted into a ball like a rag. Zoe's feet then stepped on the bed, and the bed frame that had been ravaged finally couldn't take it anymore. With a bang, it collapsed into a pile of broken wood. At the same time, Scourge suddenly stopped moving. Except for the imperfect landing, you got full marks for everything else. Betty whistled. It would be even better if you had a pair of sunglasses. Zoe rolled her eyes at her. Let's recycle the body first before talking nonsense. Yes. Betty shrugged, took out a small horn from her waist pocket, put it to her mouth, and blew it. It was a special tune, and it was also a fragment of Scourge's memory during the transformation process. For an ownerless body, it was equivalent to an activation command. From now on, I'm your new master, Betty cleared her throat and said word by word. The 6 Scourge clenched their fists in front of their chests. But only until we return to Neverwinter. When we arrive at the 3rd border city, you'll be thrown into the storage room for everyone to use. If you're good-looking, you'll have a chance to see the light of day again. Otherwise, you'll be scrapped. Of course, I don't think you'll have much hope, Betty said half-jokingly, although she knew these bodies wouldn't react at all. The magic blood had destroyed the self-consciousness of the original owners. Zoe opened the bronze door and saw many guards rushing toward the Lord's bedroom at the end of the corridor. She also heard hurried footsteps upstairs and downstairs. Apparently, the short battle had completely broken the peace of the night, and the entire castle district had entered a state of defense. Do you see those guys in armor? Betty smiled. Go and kill them. As soon as she finished speaking, the gods' punishment warriors rushed out from behind her like wild beasts. They raised their swords and rushed toward the guards. Under the surprised and puzzled gazes of the guards, the gods' punishment warriors thrust their swords into their chests. The castle seemed to be boiling. With the soldiers of the First Army clearing the way and Hagrid covering for them, Joe entered the dungeon without any trouble. However, when he saw Farina hanging on the rack, He felt as if his chest had been smashed by a hammer, and an indescribable pain gripped his heart. The dazzling woman was now like a piece of dead wood that had been drained of all vitality, hanging powerlessly on the chain. There was hardly a patch of smooth skin on her body, and the crisscrossed whip marks spread from her shoulders to her legs. Places like the back and chest were the main areas of destruction. Thick liquid was flowing from the red and swollen marks, which were obviously wounds that had not been properly treated after being burned by a soldering iron. Judging from the interrogation, she did not choose to surrender to Lorenzo even though she had been tortured like this. Joe trembled as he walked toward her, feeling that every step was extremely difficult. However, the soldiers reacted faster. They untied the chains and released Farina from the rack. "Is this the person you want to save? Don't just stand there, come and help." "But, yes." Joe seemed to have woken up from a dream. He picked up Farina and laid her flat on the straw couch. The soldier seemed to have been prepared for this. He took out a bunch of bottles and jars from his backpack and began to give her emergency treatment. Although Joe did not know what the effects of those potions were, he could tell from Farina's gradually calming breathing that they were effective. While he was helping to bandage her wounds, Farina suddenly moaned and opened her eyes slightly. How could it be you?" she murmured. "Am I dreaming?" "No, it's not a dream. It's all over." Joe held her face in his hands and replied in a choked voice. "All over?" Farina paused for a moment. "I see. I'm dead, right? That's why I saw you in the dungeon." She slowly raised her hand and touched Joe's cheek with her twisted fingers. Lorenzo had not only pulled out her nails, but also broken her fingers one by one. At that moment, it looked more like a withered branch than a hand. "I'm sorry that I couldn't continue the church. I've let you down. I don't care at all." Joe felt a warm trickle down his cheeks. "And it's not your fault at all." "Are you comforting me?" "Strange. You've never been like this before." Farina's bloody lips parted. "No matter what, don't go away. Stay with me for a while, okay?" Joe could no longer hold back his tears and hugged her tightly. "I'll stay with you. No matter where you go, I'll be by your side, even if I die." Chapter 11:16. Farina had a dream. The whizzing of the whip, the cursing of the enemy, and the excruciating pain gradually left her. Everything around her was pure white, and the ground was so smooth that it could reflect her appearance. This world seemed to have no boundaries, and the only landmark was a tall stone gate in the distance. Behind the gate, there was a faint melody, sacred and pleasant. "Maybe this is what people see before they die," she thought to herself. After walking this last distance, she would arrive at the land of eternal peace. Farina was not satisfied. In the end, she could not kill the traitor with her own hands and avenge everyone who followed her here. At the same time, she felt a lot of guilt. Toktar's task had gone down the drain. She was indeed not a person who could shoulder the responsibility alone, and she was not even a qualified leader. Her talent was just SOS. The only reassuring thing was that she didn't beg for mercy in the end. Especially when the red-hot iron needle pierced her fingertip, she almost thought she would completely collapse in the next moment. Now that she thought about it, she still felt it was a bit unbelievable that she could hold on until the end. Otherwise, she would not be able to face her comrades who died one step ahead of her. However, these emotions did not last long, and they scattered like dust. After all, she would soon enter her eternal sleep. No matter how she thought about it, there was no way to change it, was there? Farina walked towards the stone gate step by step. According to the legends, there would be no more pain or sorrow there, and time would be frozen. Everything would remain in its most glorious moment, and it would be the cornerstone of God's kingdom forever. This should have been something to be happy about, but for some reason she did not feel happy. Who is this? Farina. Just when she was at a loss, a hazy voice came from beside her. She remembered now. It was Joe's voice. He did not participate in the attack, so he could not have been captured by Lorenzo, so it was just her imagination. Even so, Farina suddenly felt relieved. So that's what happened, she thought. She just didn't want to finish this last journey alone. Even if she was entrusted with a responsibility that was beyond her ability, even if it was to shirk responsibility, she did not care. She longed for the feeling of being needed. She did not want to go on alone anymore. Don't go away. Stay with me for a while, okay? I will. The voice replied intermittently. No matter where you go, I will be by your side, even in death. That was enough. Even if it was an illusion. She seemed to have returned to that winter several years ago, when she climbed Hermes alone. Just as she was about to collapse, a carriage stopped in front of her. Farina stepped onto the steps of the stone door and pushed it open. Thank you. The light behind the door shot out in all directions and instantly enveloped her. When the light dissipated, Farina opened her eyes and found that the ceiling above her head was shaking slowly. Is this what the divine kingdom looks like? It didn't look as glamorous as he had imagined. Furthermore, time did not seem to stop flowing. She tried to turn her head and saw a familiar face. Farina hesitated for a moment and asked tentatively, Joe? Joe was lying next to her as if he had fallen asleep. After calling his name a few times, he opened his sleepy eyes and looked at her. Then, an ecstatic expression appeared on Joe's face. You're awake? Awake? Farina frowned. Shouldn't I have... Before she could finish her sentence, she felt the burning pain return to her body. Even the slightest movement was excruciating. You just fainted from exhaustion. Joe covered her head. Don't worry. Everything will be fine. Farina could not help but be stunned. After a long while, she came to her senses. Not only did she not die, but she also escaped from the dungeon. Did this mean, Lorenzo he's dead? After getting this unexpected answer, Farina suddenly felt refreshed. Really? How did you do it? It wasn't me who killed him. Joe shook his head. It was the King of Grey Castle, His Majesty Roland Wimbledon. Roland Wimbledon? It was a name that she did not want to hear the most. What are you talking about? How could he possibly help us take back Archduke Island? She suddenly looked around and asked, Wait a minute, where is this place? Aren't we on Archduke Island? We're now on the sea, and our destination is Grey Castle's city of Neverwinter. You've been in a coma for 3 days. You only survived because of the First Army's medicine, Joe said softly. Don't worry. I'll tell you everything. An hour later, Farina finally understood what had happened behind the scenes. I've also asked Sean about His Majesty's trial, Joe said. As long as you don't have the witch's blood on your hands, don't participate in the persecution, and don't slaughter the people of Grey Castle, you won't be sentenced to death. You're a warrior of the Vanguard Battalion, and you've been stationed in the new holy city all year round to fight against demonic beasts. I used to be a priest's assistant, so I can't meet those witches. In other words, both of us can survive. He became more excited as he spoke. Although you're badly injured, there's a witch named Nana in Neverwinter. She can cure any kind of injury as long as you pay. I'll find a way to pay for it. No matter how much she wants, I'll definitely help you stand up again. In order to prevent her from escaping, Lorenzo had broken the tendons in her hands and feet and smashed her knees with a hammer. She was now a cripple. But this was not the focus of Farina's attention. Because of me, what? Because of me, you made a deal with that devil? She rebuked him angrily. He destroyed the church and all hope. How can you face Lord Tuckerthor? Farina! Don't touch me! She choked and spat out some blood. The fate of the world, the fate of all human beings, was destroyed by him alone. How can you ask him for help? Compared to the battle of divine will, my life is not worth mentioning. Even if you save me, what's the point? I'd rather go to hell and wait for him, until the moment he falls into the abyss. Clap, clap, clap. Suddenly, there was a round of applause outside the room. I'm so touched. I didn't expect to receive such support from mortals after more than 400 years. What a surprise. A woman pushed the door open and walked in. I support the church that strives for the future of human beings, not the minions of the King of Grey Castle. Farina endured the sharp pain in her chest and scolded. But before she could finish her words, she was stunned. Innova, Legion Commander? At that moment, she almost suspected that there was something wrong with her eyes. In the martial arts hall of the new holy city hung the portraits of the outstanding leaders of the Judgment Army. Most of them had received the highest honor bestowed by the Pope, the Scourge Transformation Ceremony. They could be regarded as the elites of the elites. Innova had served as the Legion Commander of the Judgment Army, which could be said to be the highest rank a female warrior could reach. Because of this, Farina had always regarded her as her goal. But the problem was, Innova was a figure from more than 100 years ago. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.